Chapter 2556. The princess had the aura of royalty. All the women in the pavilion treated her as their leader. Ning Shu's gaze swept across the women present. Some of them looked at Ning Shu openly, while others avoided Ning Shu's gaze. Ning Shu memorized all the women who were acting strangely in his heart. Then, he said to the princess, "Your body has recovered, but the wound in your heart hasn't." The princess's expression flickered. She said comfortingly, "Sister Pan, don't be sad. This child is gone. It means that you and the child are not fated. When fate comes, you will naturally have it." Ning Shu was speechless. "Why don't you say that if the old doesn't go, the new won't come?" Ning Shu saw that there were no more seats in the pavilion, but no one gave up their seats. Ning Shu stared at a madam. He didn't know this madam. Anyway, there were many women in the backyard. The client was always in his own courtyard. Sometimes, even the madams in the backyard couldn't figure it out. He couldn't figure out why modern people ran to the ancient times. The living conditions in the ancient times were clearly more difficult. They relied on their legs to walk and shouted to communicate. If they weren't careful, they would lose their lives. It seemed that they couldn't survive in the modern era and could achieve great things in the ancient times. The ancient people weren't so stupid. Many systems ran to the ancient times. To Ning Shu, the only thing better about the ancient times than the modern times was that there was spiritual energy. The madam who was sitting felt uncomfortable under Ning Shu's gaze. She could only give up her seat. Ning Shu sat down openly and asked with a smile, "What are you talking about? Tell me." One of the madams covered her mouth and said, "Sister Pan, we were just talking about a shop. The things are expensive and ugly." "What a profiteer. I think it's a jewelry shop called Iju." Everyone seemed to have found a topic and started discussing. Ning Shu's expression was indifferent. He lowered his head and played with his fingernails. However, Xiao Chui, who was behind Ning Shu, was so angry that her face was red. This jewelry shop was opened by the old master. When the young miss and the young master arrived at the capital, the old master also came to the capital to open a shop. He didn't expect the shop to earn much money. He just hoped that if the young miss needed anything, she could go to the shop and let him know. So that miss would have a place to stay when she went out in the capital. If anything happened, she could take care of her. These people were pointing at the mulberry tree and cursing the locust tree. Ning Shu looked at his hand and then glanced at the woman who spoke. He said indifferently, "If I remember correctly, Sister Li used to be from the Cool Breeze gang. You don't have the money to buy things, but you still say things are expensive. What kind of logic is that? Could it be that the money benefactor gave was not enough to buy a piece of jewelry?" Hurriedly coming out to be the vanguard, he had to be prepared to face a hail of bullets. "You're talking nonsense. Although I come from a humble background, I'm still a virgin." Mrs. Li immediately defended herself. She felt that the women around her were looking at her with a playful gaze. She was so angry that she glared at Ning Shu. What was wrong with this woman? Why did she have thorns all over her body? In the past, she wouldn't have come to gatherings like this and would have stayed far away. Virgin, that's to say that you don't even have a benefactor. You're a poor wretch who doesn't have any benefactor to give you money. You can't afford to buy things and you're cursing other people as profiteers. You can ask the princess. Would the princess curse other people as profiteers because she can't afford to buy things? Ning Shu looked indifferently at Mrs. Li. Mrs. Li's face flushed red. Today, she was actually stabbed by the doe-like Mrs. Pan. This made Mrs. Li feel insulted. The madams of low status in the residence all took pleasure in stepping on Pan Wenlan, as if they were noble. The princess used a handkerchief to cover her mouth, as if to hide her emotions. Finally, she said to Ning Shu, "Sister Pan, it's not good to talk about this kind of thing here." Ning Shu asked in surprise, "Why can't you talk about it?" Many people here came from that place. If you can't talk about it, it means that these people shouldn't be standing here. The princess was speechless. Mrs. Li's face turned purple and she glared at Ning Shu. Ning Shu laughed again. I'm just saying it casually. Don't mind it. Ever since I lost my child, my spirit hasn't been very good. I'm sad and I blame myself. I blame myself for not being able to give birth to a child for the master. Every day, I can't eat or sleep well. When I fall asleep, there's a child crying beside my ear. I can't stand it anymore. Ning Shu's voice was low and gloomy. At first glance, it sounded a little eerie and scary. Some of the women present turned pale, and some of their eyes flickered. The princess's expression was normal as she said, Sister Pan is overthinking things. Relax your spirit. I believe that you can definitely give birth to another child for the master. Ning Shu nodded. She seemed to be touched and held the princess's hand. She said, Thank you, sister. That's why I've been taking care of my body and preparing to give birth to another child for the master. If the master knew that sister is so virtuous, he would definitely be very happy. Princess, what did I say? I didn't say that I would give the master to you. The princess didn't have much contact with this main wife. Now that she looked at her, she was a little thick-skinned. The princess pulled her hand out and said directly, all of us want to give the master a child. That's why everyone has to work hard. However, I think that it's better to find a doctor to take a look at the master and nourish his body. Perhaps everyone will be able to conceive a child easily. However, it's not easy to get a child. Everyone, don't be like me. As Ning Shu spoke, she covered her face with a handkerchief and began to cry. Her voice was like that of a female ghost, which gave everyone goosebumps. Every day when I sleep, my ears are filled with the sound of my child crying. As a mother, my heart hurts as if it's being cut by a knife. I don't understand why my child is crying so heartbreakingly. He's crying so much that my heart is about to break. A good chat session had inexplicably turned into a memorial session. Ning Shu cried for a long time. She wiped her face with a handkerchief. I'm sorry. I'm too sad. Ever since I married the master, I've only been pregnant with this one child. In the end, the child is gone. I'm so sad. I'm so desperate. Boo-hoo. Ning Shu covered her face with her handkerchief and cried again. Everyone, thought the princess couldn't help but interrupt Ning Shu's sobs. She comforted Ning Shu. Sister Pan, don't be too sad. You'll have a child eventually. Thank you, princess. After Ning Shu's commotion, everyone was no longer in the mood to eat melon seeds and chat. The sun was shining brightly, but after her commotion, they felt that the surroundings had become gloomy. Wasn't it embarrassing to talk about such a thing? If you lost a child, everyone would only be very happy. Did you really think that everyone could empathize with you? At most, they would feel a little guilty. Ning Shu used her mental strength to observe the expression of the woman in the pavilion. Then, she bade farewell and left, covering her face with tears. Everyone thought she was really unlucky. Pan Wenlan was the unluckiest person in the backyard. This person's existence made people feel very uncomfortable, but she had always been with the master/BK. Chapter 2557. The women in the backyard were all as beautiful as flowers, but this woman was an old woman. The princess frowned and said, Everyone, disperse. Don't tell the master about what happened today. Sister Pan is upset and is complaining to everyone. It's fine if you all hear about it. Yes. Because of her noble status, she was the hidden main wife in the backyard. These people would not submit to Pan Wenlan, but they would be deterred by her status. After all, her father was the emperor, the king of the world. Ning Shu returned to her courtyard and casually wiped her face. Xiao Cui, on the other hand, was glowing. "Miss, you don't have to be polite with these people. You are the main wife and they are the concubines." Ning Shu only said, "Don't say such things. The master doesn't like to hear it." Ning Shu was combing her hair in front of the mirror. She seemed to have found a strand of white hair and immediately pulled it out. Looking at the white hair, she was already an old woman in the eyes of the ancient people. In fact, she was only 25 years old and had been married to Lu Hao for almost 10 years. She accompanied Lu Hao through the imperial examinations and then rose from a small official in the Hanlin Academy to the 4th rank of the secondary class. It was not easy for her to get pregnant and the child she had been looking forward to for so many years was gone. It would be strange if the client did not break down. The girls in the rear courtyard were all around 15 or 16 years old. Compared to the delicate flowers of 17 or 18 years old, the client looked old. As a modern person, Lu Hao actually said that the client was 25 years old. What a joke. His reason was not good enough. Ning Shu used her mental strength to cover the entire Lu residence. She wanted to see how these women would react after she cried and made a fuss. There must be some special emotions after returning to their own courtyard. Xiao Cui went to make soup for Ning Shu. Ning Shu lay on the bed with her eyes closed. She looked like she was resting, but in fact, she was observing every woman in the backyard. Most of the daughters of the aristocratic families did not react. They were indifferent to this matter. It was Madame Yin who was secretly burying something. Madame Yin was a singer raised by a minister. She had heard that Lu Hao was very good to women. During another banquet, she played the wrong guqin and knelt on the ground in fear to beg for forgiveness. Madame Yin appeared in front of Lu Hao in such a weak and helpless state. Every man had a dream of being a hero, or a hero saving a damsel in distress. Women hoped that there would be a man who would step on the rainbow clouds to save them. She could only repay the favor of saving her life with her body. Just like that, they hit it off. In any case, Madame Yin gave people the impression that she was gentle and weak, like a dodder flower. It made men feel that this woman couldn't leave them and that she wouldn't be able to live without them. He was so imposing. Madame Yin buried the things, washed up, and went to the princess's courtyard. She wanted to see the princess, but was stopped by the princess's maidservant, who said that the princess was resting. Madame Yin was very anxious and repeatedly insisted that she wanted to meet the princess. However, the maidservant raised her chin and simply said, "No." Madame Yin could only return in disappointment. Ning Shu turned over and opened his eyes. Madame Yin, princess. He would wait until it was late at night to see what she had buried. Seeing that Madame Yin was looking for the princess in such a hurry, she must have something to tell the princess, but the princess refused to see her. After Lu Hao got off work, he came to visit Ning Shu as usual. He asked about Ning Shu's health, showed his concern, and said a few nice words. The thing that modern girls hated the most was to drink more water. He opened his mouth and the ancient girls liked it very much. Then, Lu Hao drew lots to accompany a woman. Lu Hao was living like an emperor these days. Drawing lots. These were all women he loved deeply. It wasn't good to choose any one of them. He would leave it to the heavens to decide. Drawing lots was fair to everyone. Everyone had the same chance of being caught. Ning Shu used his mental power to take a look and almost spat out saliva. Is this really okay? Why don't you call everyone over and have fun with them? Everyone was as close as sisters. It wouldn't be a big deal even if they were honest with each other. Lu Hao picked Madame Yin. Madame Yin actually fit Lu Hao's impression of ancient women. She played the guqin and was beautiful. Ning Shu, sister only wants to go to Madame Yin's courtyard in the middle of the night. She didn't know if Lu Hao's system had a scanning function. What if she was scanned by the system when she went to Madame Yin's courtyard? Therefore, Ning Shu decided to wait a day before digging. Some people were unhappy that he had to sleep in Madame Yin's courtyard continuously. For example, the princess. The princess's status was so high that it couldn't be ignored. If he married the big boss's daughter and complained to the big boss about it, he would be the one at a disadvantage. Ning Shu used his mental power to check the princess's courtyard. For some reason, perhaps it was his sixth sense, Ning Shu felt that this matter had something to do with the princess. The princess was the only woman in this courtyard who had a child. The others didn't. This was very suspicious. Moreover, Madame Yin even went to look for her. Madame Yin was also in the pavilion at that time. Lu Hao was really a hindrance. He made it impossible for her to dig up the things Madame Yin buried. Ning Shu got up from the bed and stretched. Xiao Chui had already brought in the stewed soup. Ning Shu drank the soup and asked Xiao Chui, "Do we have anything from the princess in our courtyard?" "Madam, why are you asking this? You've already kept the princess's things. They're useless in the cupboard," Xiao Chui said. "Do you want to take them out now?" Ning Shu nodded. "Take them all out. Let me see." The fact that these women in the courtyard didn't have a child probably had something to do with the princess's gifts. As someone who had seen countless otaku fighting dimensions, these gifts were mixed with personal goods. It was very damaging to the women. In terms of sterilization, the women in ancient times could be said to be innovating. All of them were experts at abortion and contributed to family planning. Xiao Chui immediately opened the cupboard and took out many things. There were pieces of cloth, ready-made clothes, and some jewelry. These jewelry didn't look cheap either. The princess was probably the most generous person in this residence. From time to time, she would reward some things to buy people's hearts. She looked like a proper wife. The princess was like this now because the person who entrusted her with the gifts didn't live up to her expectations. She didn't fight for her rights and interests and didn't dare to fight for it. When Lu Hao said that the women in the courtyard weren't differentiated by age, she should have asked clearly and asked who she was. In this way, her rights were taken away. "Madam, everything is here," Xiao Chui said. She didn't quite understand why Madam had suddenly found the things. Ning Shu put down the spoon and checked the pieces of cloth, clothes, jewelry, and facial cream one by one. She put the clothes to her nose and sniffed. There wasn't any special smell. Then, she poured water on the cloth and sniffed again. There was nothing unusual about the clothes and jewelry. This made Ning Shu feel that she might be gauging the heart of a gentleman with her own mean measure. /BK Chapter 2558. Opening the lid, Ning Shu took a whiff. It was quite fragrant. There didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary. Could it be that so many women were infertile? Was the princess pregnant? The client had been married to Lu Hao for almost 10 years, and this was the first time she was pregnant. Could it be Lu Hao's problem? There were a lot of problems in this. When the client was bedridden, all problems would be solved if he died. She didn't want to get to the bottom of it, but she was unwilling to change her life. Ning Shu propped up her chin and rummaged through the items. Xiao Chui asked, "Madam, what are you looking for?" "Nothing." Ning Shu opened another box of facial cream. The facial cream was crystal clear and jelly-like. It wasn't easy to have such a facial cream in ancient times. Facial creams were used to maintain the health of women in ancient times. The technology used to make these cosmetics was crude. Most of them contained heavy metals such as lead and mercury. Using them for a long time would cause the pigment to precipitate and accelerate the aging process. Actually, lead would make the skin look very white, but it was very harmful to the skin. From small things like fen dye to big things like clothes and jewelry, the princess was in charge of the entire Lu residence. She controlled the Lu residence's finances and was the main wife. Ning Shu opened the lipstick. The lipstick was bright red. Taking a whiff, it was fragrant. The lipstick was made from beef bone marrow. After the bone marrow had melted, wine soaked in clove and patchouli was poured into the pot and continued to fry. Then, a grass called artemisia was added to change the color. After the lipstick was fried, it was filtered with a cotton cloth. The final oil was placed in a porcelain bowl to condense. After it had completely solidified, it was the lipstick. During the production process, the fragrance would be added and the color would be covered. In short, Ning Shu felt that everything could have been smuggled in. The next night, Lu Hao finally didn't go to Madame Yin's courtyard. He went to accompany the princess. In the dead of night, Ning Shu took advantage of the fact that everyone was asleep to sneak into Madame Yin's courtyard. He found the place where Madame Yin had buried something and dug it out. Once he threw the soil away, Ning Shu smelled medicine. He dug it out and found a medicine bag. Ning Shu buried the soil and took the medicine bag back. He spread the medicine bag on the table and carefully identified the herbs. Ning Shu was a little surprised. He thought it was something harmful, but he didn't expect it to be pregnancy-stabilizing medicine. Medicine to prevent miscarriage. Could it be that Madame Yin was pregnant? But there was no news at all. If Madame Yin was pregnant but didn't mention it or announce it, then Madame Yin's client would have to be more careful. Especially in the first trimester, when the pregnancy was not stable, it would not be widely publicized. Madame Yin was pregnant and she was still clapping with Lu Hao. Wasn't she afraid that something would happen during the process? Ning Shu facepalmed. The client didn't know much about the matters in the backyard, so she didn't receive much information. Ning Shu had no idea how to deal with Lu Hao at the moment, but there were so many secrets in the backyard. Lu Hao, these women all love me. We're a family. Woman, fuck, I'll kill you, you little bitch. With the support of the system, Ning Shu didn't dare to act rashly. Every system had different functions. Some systems could turn their clients into fairies, some had the ability to detoxify, and some could scan the surroundings. In short, the system's abilities were ever-changing. Other than the host, no one else knew what the system's abilities were. Moreover, the system itself could develop more powerful abilities at any time. As long as there was enough luck, enough merit, and enough faith. Ning Shu collected the medicine bag on the table. After some thought, he decided to bury it back. Could Madame Yin have gone to the princess to save the child in her womb? Would it be useful to go to the princess? That was a slap in the face. Lu Hao had always thought that the women in his backyard were like biological sisters, but when one of them got pregnant, they were all trembling in fear. They didn't even dare to say anything or guarantee that they could give birth to the child. In the next few days, Ning Shu had nothing to do. Sometimes, he would stroll to Madame Yin's courtyard and rest there. Madame Yin was a little uncomfortable when she saw Ning Shu, but she still asked the servants to serve tea. Ning Shu took a sip of tea and used his mental strength to scan Madame Yin's abdomen. He saw that she was indeed pregnant, but the fetus was now a cyst about the size of a silver coin. It hadn't formed yet. It should only be a little more than a month. Ning Shu took a sip of tea and put down the teacup. He said, "You don't seem to be in good spirits. Are you pregnant?" "I hid it when I was pregnant." When Madame Yin heard this, she almost jumped out of her chair. She looked as if she had been stung by a poisonous scorpion. "No, I'm not pregnant." "Sister Pan, you must be joking." Madame Yin quickly denied. Ning Shu only said, "If anything happens, you must remember to tell Master. That will make him happy. I've been pregnant before and I know what it's like to be pregnant." Madame Yin forced a smile. "Sister Pan, I'm not pregnant." Sigh. Ning Shu sighed faintly. "If my child was still here, it should be able to move now and stretch its arms and legs in the stomach." Madame Yin subconsciously clutched her stomach, her face turning paler. Ning Shu got up and left. There was no point in hiding it. There were too many eyes. If you didn't tell them, they would secretly take away your child. You wouldn't even have a place to cry. If you bled, the doctor could say that it was your period. Of course, there might be an accident if you told them. Anyway, it wasn't easy to be pregnant. Madame Yin was probably frightened by Ning Shu and told Lu Hao that she was pregnant immediately. Lu Hao was pleasantly surprised. He did not have many children. Pan Wenlan was pregnant and had a miscarriage. Even now, she was blaming him. He didn't want to see that resentful face. Now that someone was pregnant, Lu Hao was very happy. He didn't have many children these years. His colleagues' harems were all blooming, but he didn't have any children. Of course, Lu Hao refused to admit that there was something wrong with him. Now that a woman was pregnant, it proved that there was nothing wrong with his ability. To prevent Pan Wenlan's incident from happening again, Lu Hao asked Madame Yin to take care of the baby. She could ask the princess when she was free. After all, the princess had given birth before. Madame Yin's smile was a little forced. The news of Madame Yin's pregnancy spread like a gust of wind to every corner of the Lu residence. Some of the noble ladies wrung their handkerchiefs. How could these lowly women get pregnant? First, it was Pan Wenlan. She was just a merchant's daughter. Fortunately, she had a miscarriage. Now, she was just a singer. How could these people have the luck to get pregnant? Because of Madame Yin's pregnancy, the atmosphere in the backyard was a little strange. The princess was quite generous. When she heard that Madame Yin was pregnant, she immediately sent some things, such as jewelry, rouge, face powder, and clothes. /BK Chapter 2559. In order to avoid trouble, the princess even found a doctor to check if there were any problems with these things. Madame Yin only accepted them after the doctor said that there were no problems. Looking at Madame Yin's behavior, Ning Shu felt that she was wary of the princess. Indeed, the princess was the only one in the mansion who had a child and no one else. It was inevitable that she would become the target of public criticism. In order to avoid any problems, the princess found a doctor first. Ning Shu looked on silently, hoping that the child in Madame Yin's belly was fine. Madame Yin's abnormal behavior also attracted Ning Shu's attention. Madame Yin was very guilty. Especially when facing her, she was very guilty. He should find a time to hypnotize Madame Yin. However, Madame Yin was very guarded now. She usually didn't leave the courtyard and didn't dare to interact with the other ladies in the backyard. She was so nervous that even Ning Shu felt tired for her. This was the sisterhood that Lu Hao mentioned. This was obviously a fake sisterhood. Since Madame Yin was pregnant, Lu Hao naturally had to spend a lot of time with her. This made the women in the backyard very unhappy. They wanted to clap with Lu Hao for love and strive to have children too. Lu Hao felt that the jealousy of these girls in the backyard was really unbearable. Of course, beautiful girls were especially cute when they acted coquettishly. If they weren't beautiful, they would be unreasonable. No matter how careful Madame Yin was, she still had a miscarriage. When Ning Shu heard the news, he sighed inwardly. It was really unexpected. Because the food that Madame Yin ate every day was prepared by herself and her maids. In her own courtyard, she didn't go to the big kitchen. No one else had touched her food. All the women in the backyard gathered in Madame Yin's courtyard and heard a low groan from inside. Lu Hao felt that these women in his backyard got along so well. When something happened to one of them, they all came to visit. Ning Shu saw a flash of relief on Lu Hao's jade-like face and twitched his mouth. I can only say that you really don't understand a woman's heart. The princess frowned and said to Lu Hao, "Old master, it will be fine." Sigh. Lu Hao glanced at Ning Shu, who was standing there. Previously, one of them had a miscarriage, and now something happened. Why did things keep happening? Was it because his vitality was too weak? Was that why he kept having miscarriages? There were many reasons for infertility, such as the vitality and quantity of sperm. Lu Hao even suspected that he might be a dead spirit or a weak spirit. The doctor came out of the room and said something shocking, "Madam isn't pregnant. Her period is here." Lu Hao, some of the women almost laughed. "I don't think so." Lu Hao didn't believe it. Madame Yin had no reason to lie about something like this. The princess said, Madame Yin must have wanted to have a child so badly that she made such a fuss. Perhaps she wanted the old master to pay more attention to him. "I'm fair to every woman in the harem. I don't want you to fight for my favor. My heart aches for all of you." Ning Shu was speechless. The princess sighed and said, "That's why Sister Yin is so muddle-headed." For a princess, calling a singer sister was simply an insult. If this incident was treated as a farce, Madame Yin would be laughed at for a long time. Even though Lu Hao prided himself on being fair to everyone, Madame Yin had caused such a ruckus. Wasn't she accusing him of mistreating her? Therefore, he was angry. As for Madame Yin, who was exhausted after the miscarriage, no one paid any attention to her. Previously, she was the subject of all the women's jealousy. Now, she was a pitiful little girl. Ning Shu returned to the courtyard. He couldn't figure out how Madame Yin had miscarried. She decocted the medicine herself and made the food herself. The maids around her were all her own people. How could she miscarry like this? Was it because of her body constitution? Ning Shu checked the jewelry, rouge, and face powder. After being pregnant, the client and Madame Yin didn't touch these things. It was common knowledge in modern people that it wasn't good to put on heavy makeup during pregnancy. But these were the only things she could come into contact with. Sometimes, even if she was pregnant, she still wanted to put on some powder and lipstick in front of her husband. Ning Shu checked the rouge and face powder over and over again. He smelled it again and again until his nose was numb. Ning Shu poured the rouge and face powder into a cup and stirred it with chopsticks. He took out a silver hairpin and placed it inside to see if it would turn black. Generally speaking, heavy metals would turn silver black. The hairpin turned slightly black when it came in contact with water. These rouge and face powders contained a certain amount of lead and mercury. But one of the hairpins was very black. It was obvious that it exceeded the standard by a lot. Rubbing these things on one's face was definitely suicide. "Ah, madam, this is the most popular facial cream in the residence. Madams like to use it. Every time you clean your face, you can rub a little on it to make your skin fair and tender," Xiao Chui said in surprise. "And it was invented by Old Master. I heard that it was boiled with pig skin. Because Old Master invented it, the effects are good. Madams like to use it. Not only do they like to apply it on their faces, but they also like to apply it on their hands and feet." Ning Shu was speechless. Using collagen boiled from pig skin to rub one's face. But why did the hairpin turn black? Ning Shu felt that he might have found the root of the problem. The collagen boiled from pig skin must have been mixed with something. But with such a white and glossy cream, it would be discovered very quickly if something was mixed with it. Then the problem was with the pig skin. Then, was the pig poisoned? Or even fed the pig some mercury? This kind of thing was in the pig's body. Mercury was very harmful to people. The madam of the brothel would mix mercury into the women's food as a way to prevent pregnancy. Mercury was enough to kill people, but it was too overkill to use it as a contraceptive. The women in the backyard used this kind of facial cream over a long period of time. The mercury would enter their bodies. Not to mention getting pregnant, they might not live for long. The bodies of pigs and humans could not digest mercury. It would accumulate in the body over a long period of time. Where did these facial creams come from? Ning Shu asked. The client really did not care about this kind of thing. Every time, the princess would give these facial creams to the madams. I heard that it was produced by the emperor for the princess's manner. The princess made this into facial cream and opened a shop. The business is quite good. Every month, she would even give old master dividends. The princess is quite generous to the madams in the residence. She did not collect money. Every madam would get 2 bottles every month. Ning Shu was speechless. Sometimes, Ning Shu felt that he was thinking too much. But sometimes, things developed in the direction he wanted. What happened to the deep sisterly love? Plastic flower sisterly love. This princess was not so generous. In fact, the client even hated these women. However, the method was very sophisticated. It was not incense or anything. Mercury and its compounds could enter the human body through different routes such as the respiratory tract, skin, and digestive tract. The toxicity of mercury was accumulated and took a long time to show. The food chain had an extremely strong ability to accumulate mercury. For example, when pigs ate grass or water containing mercury, it would pass through the food chain to the human body. There was more mercury in the human body than in the pig body, and there was more in the pig body than in the grass/BK. Chapter 2563. Anyway, he didn't know what the princess said to Lu Hao, but Lu Hao suppressed this matter and told the madams in the backyard to let this matter go. It wouldn't be good for anyone if this matter blew up. All of the madams were stupefied and ran back to their mother's home in tears. It wasn't that Lu Hao believed this matter, or that he just wanted to keep the peace. There were so many women in the backyard of every rich family. The princess was harming all the noble women by doing this. When these women made a fuss, the men couldn't do anything. They all reported it to the imperial court. There were even censors who impeached the princess, saying that the princess's actions were embarrassing the imperial court. She had no virtue. The emperor was very conflicted. Lu Hao was rolled eyes by all his colleagues. Which woman in the backyard hadn't used that face cream? Lu Hao actually wanted to rebel and kill everyone. Even the concubines in the harem would occasionally use this kind of thing. After applying it, the skin was really moist and the effect was immediate. These concubines went to the emperor and whined in front of him. The emperor's head was about to explode. This daughter of his was really a headache. She was so deceitful. Previously, she wanted to be a concubine of a small official. Although she lied to herself that she was a co-wife, she wasn't a concubine. It was already very embarrassing. Now, she actually caused such a big matter. However, this daughter of his didn't have such guts. Although she was domineering, she wouldn't be so ignorant. It was very likely that she wanted to mess with the women in the backyard, but for some reason, someone must have added fuel to the fire. But no matter who added fuel to the fire, things had already come to this. If he didn't punish the princess, his anger wouldn't be quelled. The emperor was very unhappy. He was forced to punish his own child. No matter how wrong his child was, he could punish her however he wanted, but he was very unhappy to be forced to punish her like this. But he couldn't let his daughter become a divorcee. He couldn't afford to lose this face, so this daughter must be ruined in Lu Hao's hands. If Lu Hao didn't agree, Lu Hao, woo, recently, this should be the biggest workplace crisis that Lu Hao had encountered. His colleagues around him were all picking on him. They were deliberately looking for trouble or ostracizing him. Sometimes, his colleagues would drink together after work to improve their friendship. Even if there was no friendship, there wouldn't be a deliberate situation. But now that he was in the same department, all the good things didn't come to him. Some difficult things fell to him. If there was anything that made the emperor angry, let him say it and let him face the roar of the evil dragon. There were also censors who accused him of not being strict with his family. There were no rules in the backyard, and it was a mess. It was only a matter of time before something happened. They even doubted Lu Hao's ability to work. If he couldn't even clean up his own backyard, how could he sweep the world if he didn't sweep the house? In any case, Lu Hao had no way to refute it. In any case, everyone kicks a man who is down. If he didn't do something and completely offended these colleagues, it would be especially difficult to work together. The days of being deliberately targeted were not good. A small matter could torment someone over and over again. But if he did anything to the princess's father, his boss, would have a big opinion of him. His future was almost gone. Lu Hao was caught between a rock and a hard place, and he was also very angry. He didn't expect the princess, who had always been dignified, elegant, and noble, to be so jealous. He was so jealous that he sterilized all the women in his backyard to play with heavy metal. Lu Hao came from the modern era and knew the power of these things too well. Lu Hao was now very glad that the pregnant women in the backyard had all miscarried. Otherwise, they would have given birth to idiotic and deformed children. That would be embarrassing. Moreover, the ancient people were superstitious. If there were any rumors, he wouldn't be able to complete the task. There were so many women in the backyard. Some of them had strong family backgrounds. If they didn't do anything, their family would be eyeing them covetously. But to the princess. Lu Hao shook his head. For the first time, Lu Hao felt that marrying so many awesome wives wasn't necessarily a good thing. Their family would be oppressive. Lu Hao locked himself in the study once he returned home. He didn't see any women. The entire Lu residence was in a strange atmosphere. Ning Shu ate and slept every day and didn't leave the residence. When he had nothing to do, he would tidy up his belongings. The princess went to the palace and came back in a sorry state. She saw that her courtyard was full of face cream that had been thrown by people. Some face cream spilled on the ground, and boxes were everywhere. The princess knew that these women in the backyard did it. She took a deep breath and asked people to quickly put these things away. She didn't want to touch these things. Ning Shu felt that the women in Lu Hao's backyard were quite pitiful. Their family backgrounds were strong, but even if they returned home, they would still suffer from rumors. They followed Lu Hao. After such a thing happened, they were disappointed in Lu Hao. Why didn't he punish the culprit? Wasn't he willing to do anything for the woman he loved? This matter made the people in the capital talk for a long time. At this time, some people immediately jumped out and said that the Lu residence had no rules. Without rules, something would definitely happen. Without a wife to manage, with all kinds of people mixed together, it would be strange if nothing happened to this family. The princess was called a vicious woman. There were wives who dealt with the concubines, but they didn't expect it to be so vicious. The shop couldn't continue operating. Moreover, this face cream was invented by Lu Hao. The fire was directed to Lu Hao. Accept the anger of many women. Although the shop sold normal products, no one believed it. Under the psychological effect, they felt that their faces were ruined and their bodies had all kinds of problems. The business of the medical centers in the capital was exceptionally good. They went to each family to take the pulse of the madams and young misses. Facing these accusations, the princess could only remain silent. Could it be that she only made these for the women of the Lu residence and didn't add anything else? But no matter what she said, it would be wrong. Perhaps it was because Lu Hao couldn't find anyone to chat with. He actually went to Ning Shu's courtyard. When he saw Ning Shu, he couldn't help but sigh and start to recall the past. Ning Shu, you probably forgot that I just had a miscarriage less than 2 months ago. Ning Shu asked, then what do you plan to do? No matter what I do. Now that he was facing a dilemma, he couldn't retreat. He could either offend his colleagues or offend his boss. How could an official be clean? If he was watched by his colleagues every day, he would be caught if he made any mistakes. No matter how careful he was, there would be times when he made mistakes. But if he offended the emperor, his career would end. The princess really knew how to cause trouble. Usually, he didn't see her unhappy with any woman, but she secretly caused such a big matter, /BK. Chapter 2564. Lu Hao sighed at Ning Shu's place, talking about how serious the problem was this time. Lu Hao was telling the truth, not exaggerating at all. But the more Ning Shu listened, the more she felt that something was wrong. What's the point of telling me this? I'm just a girl who doesn't leave the house and doesn't have any ability. It's useless even if you tell me. Lu Hao saw that Ning Shu's expression was unreadable, as if she wasn't affected by the mournful atmosphere. She took Ning Shu's hand and sighed, it really wasn't easy to come this far. Ning Shu grunted and didn't reply. If she did, she definitely wouldn't have anything good to say. Ning Shu vaguely guessed Lu Hao's intentions. Thinking of this possibility, Ning Shu's expression became a little ugly. I'm in a dilemma. I don't know what to do. Ning Shu's face was cold. If you don't know what to do you think I know that you don't know what to do? She was determined not to reply. Lu Hao saw that his wife wouldn't say anything even after being beaten 3 times. He said so much, but the other party didn't react at all. Lu Hao let go of Ning Shu's hand and picked up the tea to moisten his throat. Seeing that Ning Shu was still obedient, he couldn't help but ask, what do you think about this matter? Ning Shu's face was conflicted. Husband, I don't know what to do either. I can't think of a way. Lu Hao took a deep breath. I'll tell you the truth. This matter definitely can't be the princess. Ning Shu chuckled in her heart. Her face was blank. She couldn't understand what you were saying. You said that to find a scapegoat. Not only could you put out the fire, but you could also give the emperor an explanation. Sacrificing you would make the whole family happy. Lu Hao thought so in his heart. He asked the system how to resolve this matter. The system said to find a scapegoat. This matter couldn't be blown up. Lu Hao also couldn't bear it and insist on protecting the princess. It was better to change the direction and turn the matter around. The women in the backyard were either of low status and could not do such a thing, or their status was too high. They were the daughters of aristocratic families, and they were the victims. Seeing these people being pushed out, were they not treating others as fools? After thinking about it for a long time, he felt that there was a very suitable person. It was Pan Wenlan. Her family was a bit rich, but her background wasn't strong. It was normal for her to be jealous of these women. After her husband became rich, these women would flock to him and bear a grudge against him. Therefore, she did such a crazy thing. In addition, she was pregnant and had a miscarriage not long ago. Her mental state was stimulated and she even pushed the blame to the princess. Perfect. What Lu Hao could think of, Ning Shu understood as well. She was really a perfect scapegoat. Her logic and emotions made perfect sense. Ning Shu said with a confused face, Husband, don't worry. Even if this matter is settled, the princess will be fine. She is the emperor's daughter, so don't worry. Rest assured my ass. Now, the anger of the courtiers needed someone to extinguish. The emperor was the most difficult to deal with. He had to give an explanation and protect his daughter. Fuck, it was so torturous. It was so difficult. Lu Hao was also helpless. He did not realize that such a vicious woman was before. If he poisoned these women today, would he be poisoned one day as well? However, Lu Hao was thinking too much. The princess could hurt anyone, but she would not hurt Lu Hao. The matter of sterilization should be dealt with directly from Lu Hao. If it was just one person, there was no need to do it one by one. Moreover, the women kept coming into the backyard like chives. There was clearly a simpler method, but she had to take such a big risk to get rid of these women in the backyard. This was all because of love. She could not bear to hurt Lu Hao. Moreover, if Lu Hao was crippled, who would the princess find to have children? Lu Hao went straight to the point and said, Wenlan, you have to help me this time. Ning Shu lowered her head and said softly, How can I help you? I can't help you. Lu Hao's low voice was bewitching. You only need to say that you did this. I will guarantee that you will be fine. Lu Hao was also very irritated. Logically speaking, Pan Wenlon should have followed his plan. He recalled the bitterness and thought of the sweetness. He also mentioned his current predicament. Pan Wenlon should have taken the initiative to say that she wanted to help him. Then, he did not agree. Pan Wenlon insisted on helping. The two of them argued back and forth. He had no choice but to agree. Pan Wenlon risked her life for her husband. However, it did not follow the script at all. This made Lu Hao very frustrated. Taking the initiative to say it was different from forcing the other party to make a decision. If he forced the other party to change her mind at the last minute, he would go for wool and come home shorn. His good reputation would be gone. What Lu Hao wanted was for the other party to be willing to be sold and to help him count the money. Ning Shu lowered her head and twitched the corner of her mouth. She shook her head and said, "Husband, I can't help you with this matter." "Really? Why?" Lu Hao immediately held Ning Shu's hand. "Don't worry. You will be fine. It's just that this matter needs someone to divert attention so that the princess and I have time to secretly operate." "Ning Shu, I'm so stupid to believe you." He was clearly the one who pushed her out to die. Her reputation was in a mess. He even implicated the client's father and caused the client's father to be criticized behind his back. Being criticized behind his back was a small matter. Being spat on by others was a small matter. However, facing the hostility of the entire noble class, a merchant could be crushed with one finger. The client's father was really good to this daughter, whether it was in terms of living expenses or in terms of choosing a husband. When faced with a choice of benefits, a person's character could be seen. Clearly, Lu Hao was sacrificing her to protect himself. Moreover, he was not protecting the princess. Protecting the princess was because the princess's father was the emperor and determined his future and fate. If it were not for the princess, he would have taken measures and pushed her out long ago. Ning Shu tilted her head and asked Lu Hao, "Then what should I do?" "So you agree?" Lu Hao was very happy. "You just need to admit that you did this." Ning Shu said, "I can do this, but I have a condition. That is to avenge my child." "Child?" Lu Hao finally realized that she was talking about the child that had been aborted. "This was done by the princess. You have to avenge our child. She has passed away." Lu Hao suppressed the annoyance in his heart and said to Ning Shu patiently, "There's no point in arguing about this now. But I'm not satisfied. If you can't do it, then I won't agree to this matter. I used my life to pave the way for you, but you won't even agree to such a small wish. How can I be satisfied?" Ning Shu covered her face and seemed to be crying. Lu Hao thought that it made sense. In order to make a horse run like a horse eating grass, he had to give it some benefits. Only then would it be willing to work for him. "Then what do you want?" Lu Hao asked/BK. Chapter 2565. As long as it wasn't an excessive request, Lu Hao felt that he could agree to it. Treat it as his last wish. Lu Hao knew very well that Pan Wenlon, who was pushed out, would die. Even if she died, she would still be criticized behind her back. Her reputation would be tarnished for a long time. She was the best spokesperson for vicious women. "Do you want to kill the princess's child?" Lu Hao asked in disbelief. "I don't have a child, so I want to kill your child and let you feel the pain of losing a child." Were all these women so terrifying? Ning Shu's mouth twitched. Was she so vicious? What did a child less than 2 years old know? Find the person who did it. Ning Shu took a sip of tea and said directly, "My request is very simple. Since she sterilized all the sisters in the backyard and even harmed her body, then let her be sterilized too. Shouldn't she be punished for doing something wrong?" She wanted someone to take the blame for her, but she could still live well and have many children with Lu Hao in the future. Ning Shu secretly looked at Lu Hao's crotch. Should he deal with it? However, Lu Hao had a system in his body, so he couldn't act rashly. Lu Hao almost choked on his saliva. He looked at Ning Shu in horror. Were all women so vicious? Ning Shu, you pushed someone out as a scapegoat. You're not vicious. This. Lu Hao was a little hesitant. It seemed impossible to sterilize the princess like this. Moreover, the princess was such a proud person. How could she let others hurt her? Why don't you change your request? Lu Hao asked Ning Shu. If he did this to the princess and she ran back to the palace to make a fuss, the emperor would be unhappy with him again. Moreover, how bad would it be if the news of his wife being sterilized spread? This really gave him a big problem. I only have this one wish. I don't care about anything else. The child I've been looking forward to for so many years is gone. Do you know how desperate I am? Ning Shu didn't back down. Lu Hao thought to himself that he shouldn't have asked her. It wasn't good to just put the blame on her. It made her so passive now. Ning Shu saw the flicker in Lu Hao's eyes and said directly, anyway, I don't care. I'd rather die in glory than live in dishonor. Sometimes, I can really do anything. When Lu Hao heard his wife's threat, he immediately felt helpless and angry. He felt that the current Pan Wenlon was different from the Pan Wenlon of the past. In the past, Pan Wenlon would not have been so stubborn. Then I'll discuss it with the princess, Lu Hao said. Ning Shu bowed and sent Lu Hao off respectfully. He would go and discuss with the woman whether she should sterilize him. The woman would probably give him a big slap. Lu Hao had too many worries in his heart, and the burden on his body was also very heavy. There were too many things he needed to consider, and all of them were for his official career. Unknowingly, Lu Hao had already become the system's slave. Lu Hao's only thought was to be promoted and complete the mission. Under the system's rewards and guidance, he would become a winner in life. Ning Shu felt that he was very similar to Lu Hao, but he didn't have such a mandatory requirement. Lu Hao relied on the system. Without the system, Lu Hao might not have any confidence at all. Ning Shu stretched and used his mental strength to scan the entire Lu residence. He saw Lu Hao pacing back and forth at the entrance of the princess's courtyard, but he didn't enter. It was the princess's maid who saw Lu Hao and welcomed him in. When the princess saw that Lu Hao was still willing to come to her courtyard, she was very happy. She hurriedly asked the servants to prepare tea and snacks. She was so excited that she didn't know what to do. When Lu Hao saw that the princess, who was usually such a proud person, had red eyes, his heart softened. He said to her, "Don't be in such a hurry. Sit down. I have something to tell you." The princess sat down obediently. Seeing Lu Hao's serious expression, she felt a little uneasy, but she still listened to Lu Hao. Lu Hao told the princess everything that had happened. Then, he looked at the princess. "What do you think?" The princess looked as if she had been struck by lightning. She was almost petrified. Then, her face was filled with anger. What right does she have to blame me for her failure to keep the child? You even want her to be sterilized? Dream on. Ning Shu was speechless. Anyway, she had plenty of ways. No matter what the princess did. Lu Hao knew that this would be her reaction. Not to mention a woman, if one day someone said that they wanted to cripple him, it would be strange if he didn't beat that person up. Darling Lu, this matter is actually very easy to do. Since Pan Wenlon is willing to take the blame, then find some witnesses and some people in the manor to testify. Whether she agrees or not, this matter is confirmed for her. So what if she doesn't agree? So what if she agrees? The princess said directly. Since they were already fighting for real, there was no need to care about face. Since she was going to be sterilized, there was no need to be polite with her. But if she makes a fuss, the risk is too great. Lu Hao shook his head and said, if she doesn't confess willingly, others will think of it. If Pan Wenlon could confess, no matter how dissatisfied these people were, there was nothing to say. On the one hand, if they insisted on convicting her, but the criminal refused to confess, wouldn't that be a topic for gossip? In any case, Lu Hao wanted to do things perfectly. If I let you die, you have to remember my kindness. The princess immediately lost her momentum and looked at Lu Hao with red eyes. Are you really going to do this? Of course not. We can put on a show for her to see and fulfill her wish. Lu Hao looked at the princess with a straight face. Also, don't do such a thing in the future. No matter what, these are my women. The princess' nails dug into her palms, but she said sadly, I did all this because I love you. Lu Hao's heart softened again. No matter how vicious a woman was, it was all because she loved him. Lu Hao and the princess agreed to put on a show and treat it as doing a good deed to fulfill Pan Wenlon's wish before she died. Then, Lu Hao went back and forth to tell Ning Shu that he would sterilize the princess and that he could rest assured. Ning Shu said with some surprise, she agreed. After all, the princess was wrong in this matter. She should be punished, Lu Hao said. Ning Shu said, then I will watch her and see that she is indeed punished. Lu Hao was speechless. Why were these women so difficult to deal with? Even the class was difficult. Even in ancient times, the officialdom was not so tiring. Lu Hao nodded. Okay, I'll have to trouble you this time. Don't worry, your life won't be in danger. It wasn't like he was stupid enough to think that there wasn't any danger. Promise that there was no danger to her life, but won't tell me that there was danger. Lu Hao got someone to brew a bowl of medicine and told Ning Shu that it was a bowl of safflower. If she drinks this, she probably won't be able to have children in the future, Lu Hao said. /BK Chapter 2566. These women were really scary, attacking his vitals with every move. Ning Shu obviously knew that Lu Hao had asked someone to change the medicine. The medicine was just something nourishing and wasn't harmful to the body at all. Ning Shu said, I have to see her drink it with my own eyes. Otherwise, I won't be able to feel at ease. Lu Hao. Okay. Lu Hao and Ning Shu went to the princess's courtyard. The princess looked at Ning Shu with a sharp gaze, displaying the powerful aura of a princess. Ning Shu said, drink the medicine. The princess glared at Ning Shu hatefully, then looked at Lu Hao with a sorrowful gaze. That gaze was definitely sincere. Although she knew that this was an act, she still couldn't suppress the pain and sadness in her heart. Ning Shu took the medicine bowl from the tray and handed it to the princess. Drink it. It was nourishing, beautifying, and nourishing. The princess's hands trembled, and she kept looking at Lu Hao because she was worried that something had been added. Lu Hao secretly nodded at the princess. Only then did the princess relax, but she still didn't drink it. Ning Shu felt that the princess's acting was quite good. She was clearly acting, but she looked so miserable. I'm not drinking it. Who do you think you are to make me drink this kind of thing? The princess held the medicine bowl and roared at Ning Shu. Ning Shu said calmly, because this is a condition of exchange. Drink it. I can't avenge my child, so I can only use this method of exchanging a life for a life. You deserve to be cheap. The princess was furious. She was a princess, and this woman was just a merchant's daughter who reeked of money. How could she be worthy of being with her? She was a daughter of the heavens, a golden branch in jade leaf. She had already tolerated her being by Lu Hao's side. She couldn't protect her child, but she blamed others. This was a sign of incompetence, which was why she was shirking responsibility everywhere. However, she also knew that Pan Wenlon was doing this for Lu Hao's future. In the end, Lu Hao was her Achilles heel. Ning Shu, do you want me to feed you? Lu Hao could no longer bear to watch the scene of the two women bickering. This made his worldview collapse a little. He originally thought that the backyard was harmonious, but he didn't expect the princess to become an infertile patient without a word. Now, Pan Wenlon was going to sterilize the princess. Why was she going all out in this aspect? Do as you see fit. I'm leaving. Lu Hao left the courtyard and told the maidservant to tell him the result of the matter later. Ning Shu stared straight at the princess. The princess had no choice but to grit her teeth and drink it. Then, she smashed the bowl. Are you satisfied now? There's nothing I'm dissatisfied with. Ning Shu approached the princess and stroked her belly. I wonder if this place can still give birth to a child. How dare you? The princess slapped Ning Shu's hand away and coldly said, Who do you think you are? You dare to touch me with your hand? Ning Shu took 2 steps back and looked at the princess. Why wouldn't I dare? You were originally a concubine. Lu Hao and I are officially husband and wife. Even now, we still have a marriage certificate. Do you have a marriage certificate? What was a marriage certificate? The entire imperial court belonged to her family. It was as easy as flipping one's hand to get a marriage certificate. Using this matter as an example, it was simply a joke. The princess opened her mouth and was about to speak when she felt a sharp pain in her stomach. It was as if a hammer had hit her. She couldn't help but bend over and hold her stomach. The princess felt something break in her body. There was a pop. Then, her stomach felt like it was being twisted around by a steel knife. Her entire body was in so much pain that she was sweating. The princess felt very bad. It was as if all the strength in her body had been sucked out. Princess, are you okay? Ning Shu reached out to support the princess and whispered into her ear, Hubby said that the act was just to deceive you. You drank an entire bowl of red flour. The princess felt as if she had been struck by lightning. There was no trace of blood on her face. Her lips trembled as she gritted her teeth. That's impossible. She said that it was an act, but the pain in her stomach reminded her that she really drank the red flour. Lu Hao wouldn't do this to her. He wouldn't. Do you really think that hubby isn't angry at you? Of course he is, but you are a princess. If he really divorced you, his future would be gone. Otherwise, why do you think he tolerates you? You made his harem empty and caused him to offend so many of his colleagues. The women in his harem are either singers, dancers, or daughters of aristocratic families. Their family backgrounds can crush hubby. Even if I have to take the blame for this matter, hubby won't be able to take it. I've been with hubby for 10 years. I know what he's thinking, Ning Shu said calmly. Ah. The princess held her stomach. It was so painful that her vision turned black. You're lying to me. That's impossible. Impossible. How is it impossible? Also, you can poison the women in your harem. One day, you can poison him. He doesn't want a poisonous woman to give birth to his child. Ning Shu supported the princess. Go in and lie down. How can I bear to hurt him? How can I bear to? The princess was in so much pain that her steps faltered. Ning Shu grabbed her arm and she couldn't break free. She couldn't bear to hurt Lu Hao and kill the women in the harem. If it was Ning Shu, he would make Lu Hao die. Then they wouldn't be able to have children. Wouldn't it be good for them to be in the same boat? Because of love. Ning Shu looked into the princess' eyes and said, if it wasn't for his own bright future, do you really think he would be willing to keep you? If your father wasn't the emperor, do you really think he wouldn't dare to divorce you? One day, he will abandon you like he abandoned me. No, no. The princess held her head. It was so painful that it felt like it was going to split open. Thousands of feelings surged in her heart. There was also the anger of being betrayed. She said she was acting for Pan Wenlon, but she was forced to drink the safflower. She was ridiculed by Pan Wenlon, this lowly woman. No, impossible. The princess was in so much pain that her body curled into a ball. Her stomach hurt so much that it felt like countless needles were stabbing her. There was also pain in her heart. The pain of being betrayed. Princess, princess. When the maid saw the princess like this, she was scared out of her wits. Ning Shu said, "Go find a doctor for your princess." After the maid ran away, Ning Shu said to the princess again, "Even if there were 10 doctors, or even 100 doctors, they wouldn't be able to cure you. You would be like us, unable to have children. Lowly servant." The princess looked at Ning Shu with red eyes. Ning Shu sighed, "In the end, my husband told me the truth. He was just using you. I was willing to pave the way for my husband's bright future. In order to fulfill my wish, I didn't hesitate to lie to you. Even if I die, I will remain in his heart. A living person can't be compared to a dead person." Nonsense, she wouldn't remain in his heart, /BK. Chapter 2567. What do you mean by keeping it in your heart? What do you mean by keeping it in your heart? But now, the princess was clearly falling for it. She was so angry that she almost vomited blood. Pan Wenlon, you lowly servant. Ning Shu wanted to dig his ears. Over and over again, this was the only curse he could think of. Seeing you like this, I can finally die with satisfaction and avenge my child. But you will always live under my shadow. Ning Shu smiled shyly. I am very satisfied to be able to use this method to make Master remember me. Ning Shu's heart did not waver at all when he said this. He even wanted to laugh out loud. Ning Shu stared into the princess's eyes. Her eyes were deep and unfathomable. Even if you are the princess, you still have to live under my shadow. When I am alive, I am Lu Hao's wife. When I am dead, I am paving the way for his future. The princess's entire body was trembling. She was in pain and anxious. I don't believe your words. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not. In a few days, I will confess. Originally, it was you, the princess, who did it. But I have to admit that I did it. Ning Shu shook his head. I don't believe it. The princess's expression was already wavering. She kept saying things that even she did not believe. And even if you confront hubby, he will not admit it. Because offending and hurting the royal family is a serious crime. For his own future, he will not admit it even if he dies. Actually, if you ask hubby, you will only be hurt again. I am the one who has been with hubby for 10 years. After Ning Shu said this sentence, she did not know why this body suddenly gave birth to an inexplicable feeling of pleasure. Ning Shu, could it be that the client had always wanted to say this, but did not have the courage or confidence to say it? The princess was anxious and in pain. She fainted. Ning Shu felt that he was an evil female supporting character who sowed discord and caused a misunderstanding between the two. Fuck. Buddha is merciful. After leaving the princess's courtyard, he went directly to find Lu Hao. He said to him, I saw the princess drink it. I think the medicine is harmful to the body. It messed up the princess's menstrual cycle. What? Lu Hao was puzzled. The princess seems to be bleeding. I'm not sure about the details. You'll have to ask the doctor. Lu Hao felt that her period must have come. That bowl of medicine was an ordinary tonic, and it was brewed by his manservant who stayed close to him. It couldn't be wrong. Then this matter? Lu Hao looked at Ning Shu and asked. Ning Shu said, Don't worry. I will definitely confess. But give me some time. Let me copy some Buddhist scriptures and burn them for the child. Sure, but we don't have much time. Perhaps because his wife of 10 years was about to die, Lu Hao sighed and held Ning Shu's hand. Thank you. I'll say thank you and then let you die. Are you willing? Ning Shu only smiled and did not say anything. When he returned to his courtyard, Xiao Chui welcomed him with a serious expression. She poured some tea for Ning Shu and said with a trembling voice, "Miss, don't do anything stupid." Ning Shu looked at Xiao Chui and felt that this girl was actually quite intelligent. It's okay. I know what I'm doing. Miss, you have to think about Master. Master only has one daughter. Ning Shu said, "Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Go and prepare the food. I'm hungry." Xiao Chui worriedly went to prepare the food. Lu Hao went to the princess's courtyard and saw the princess lying on the bed in a cold sweat. Her stomach was in so much pain that she couldn't stand it. Lu Hao sat by the bed and asked, "Does it still hurt? Use the water bottle to warm it up." The princess opened her eyes weakly and saw Lu Hao speaking with a normal expression as if nothing had happened. Pan Wenlan's voice kept echoing in her ears, over and over again. Now this man actually had the nerve to ask her how her body was. "You gave me safflower. You gave me safflower." The princess teared up and questioned Lu Hao weakly. "What are you talking about? What safflower?" "No, it's a tonic." As expected, he wouldn't admit it. The princess felt as if her heart was pierced by thousands of arrows. Lu Hao frowned. "What are you doing?" Looking at her expression, she seemed to have misunderstood something. "What's going on? Explain it clearly." "You gave me safflower." "No." Lu Hao almost wanted to scold her. "Are you crazy? You want to drink this kind of thing so much." The princess was so angry that she almost fainted. If she didn't drink safflower, her body wouldn't be like this. She was already like this, and he was still denying it. "Am I a tool for you to chase after power?" The princess said with her back facing him. Sometimes, people were like this. It was clearly their advantage, but they insisted on treating it as their burden. "Do you love me because I'm rich? Do you love me because I'm handsome?" "Lu Hao, you must have gotten your period into your brain." What was she doing? This matter hadn't been solved yet. She had caused such a big mess, and he was thinking of a way to solve it for her. What was wrong with this guy? The princess looked at Lu Hao's cold face. She couldn't suppress the grievance and pain in her heart. For Lu Hao, she became a concubine and wronged herself. But Lu Hao treated her like this because of Pan Wenlan's wish. It was more likely a plan to kill two birds with one stone. He let Pan Wenlan convict her and used this method to punish her. Just as Pan Wenlan said, Lu Hao was very angry. The princess didn't want to believe that bitch Pan Wenlan's words, but everything that happened in front of her made her believe it. The princess felt as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. Lu Hao was stared at by the princess with fear, hatred, and despair. He suddenly felt that the princess was crazy. From the beginning until now, he had never blamed her. Instead, she looked at him with such a gaze. Lu Hao flung his sleeves and left. From the princess's point of view, Lu Hao was guilty and didn't dare to face her. If he explained it to her clearly, she could tolerate anything. She poisoned other women, but in the end, she was drugged by her husband. The pain in her stomach was like her intestines were being pulled around and tied into a bow. It was so painful that her whole body was convulsing. A weak moan came from the princess's mouth. The princess, who had suffered a blow, felt that there was nothing left to live for. The princess loved Lu Hao so much. Now that she was betrayed, she hated him so much. The pain in her stomach reminded her how cold and heartless this man was. He didn't love her. The one he loved was that old Pan Wenlan who couldn't even give birth to a child. That night, the princess's courtyard was brightly lit. Maids came and went, carrying basins in and out. Everyone was guessing what had happened. Did something happen to the princess? If something really happened, it would be very satisfying. These women in the backyard hated the princess to death. If it wasn't for the princess, they would probably want to tear the princess apart. The princess wasn't doing well at all now. The pain in her stomach didn't lessen at all. She was suffering in hell. /BK. Chapter 2568. The princess was in pain the entire night and couldn't sleep. The princess's courtyard was brightly lit until dawn. After one night, the princess looked like she had lost a lot of weight. The next morning, she hurriedly took a sedan back to the palace. She might have gone to complain, or she might have gone back to the palace to see the imperial doctor. In short, the princess was in so much pain that she couldn't stand. She met Lu Hao at the door. Lu Hao saw that the princess was going out early in the morning and asked, "Where are you going?" The princess looked at Lu Hao. His face was as white as jade and he was wearing an official's robe. She thought about how she was tossing and turning in bed in pain and how she couldn't have children in the future. When she saw how calm Lu Hao was, she was so angry that her intestines were churning. She sat in the sedan with a belly full of anger. "Lu Hao. Your body isn't good. Don't go out. Let the servants boil some medicine for you to drink." The princess chuckled and entered the palace. Lu Hao, what was wrong with her? Women were unreasonable when they were on their period. When the princess reached the palace and found her biological father, she cried a mess. The grievance in her heart and the pain in her body made the princess explode when she saw her father. The emperor saw that she was sweating from the pain and quickly called the imperial doctor to take a look. How did his daughter become like this? Although this daughter always caused trouble, she was still his daughter. The imperial doctor couldn't figure out what was wrong with the princess, but he used acupuncture to stop the pain. The princess sobbed and told the emperor what happened. Of course, she emphasized that Lu Hao made her drink safflower for Pan Wenlon. Although a bowl of safflower wasn't enough to make her unable to have children, this was an attitude that showed what kind of person Lu Hao was. The princess said aggrievedly that Lu Hao married her for his future. The emperor was furious when he heard this. After scolding Lu Hao for a while, he calmed down and asked, "I remember that Lu Hao has such a wife, but I don't believe that he would hurt you, a princess, for a merchant's daughter." Did water enter Lu Hao's brain? The princess's expression flickered. Of course, she didn't say the reason. The emperor saw the princess's evasive gaze and knew that there was a secret. The princess saw that she couldn't hide it anymore. Under the emperor's repeated threats, she finally told him the whole thing. The emperor, great. His daughter was so angry that someone used such a method to take revenge on her. "I will deal with this matter." The emperor sighed and said, "Do you really like Lu Hao?" "No, I hate him." It was obviously a lie. "Then how about I remove Lu Hao from his position?" The emperor asked. The princess was stunned. "Imperial father, you can't remove Lu Hao from his position." She hated Lu Hao, but if Lu Hao was removed from his position, Lu Hao would probably hate her to death. There was no more room for negotiation. The eunuchs in the palace sent a message to the Lu mansion, saying that the emperor wanted to see Pan Wenlon. The emperor summoned her. Ning Shu thought of the princess who entered the palace early this morning. The real battle had begun. Ning Shu asked Xiao Cui to prepare better clothes for him to meet the emperor. In fact, the chances of success in this matter were not very high. The emperor was the princess's father. If he did not protect his own daughter, would he protect her, the person who made his daughter a concubine? Xiao Cui was very worried and asked worriedly, "Miss, why did the emperor summon you to the palace?" "I don't know. We'll know when we get to the palace." Xiao Cui tidied Ning Shu's dress, her hands trembling. She followed Ning Shu out of the Lu mansion. Ning Shu sat on the sedan and headed in the direction of the imperial palace. Ning Shu propped up his chin. The client's status was indeed very low. She was the daughter of a merchant. If it wasn't for Lu Hao's misgivings about his reputation, the client would probably have fallen long ago. Lu Hao boasted that he treated all beauties like this and would not abandon the women who had been with him. Lu Hao's goal was to control the world and lie drunk on the knees of beauties. Arriving at the palace gates, Ning Shu got off the sedan and saw Lu Hao standing there. Seeing Ning Shu, he walked over and whispered to Ning Shu, "There will be a chance later." Ning Shu understood Lu Hao's words. Later, she would admit to the emperor that everything was done by her. Ning Shu only said, "Husband, do you know why the princess entered the palace early in the morning? Will she speak ill of you?" "Why?" Lu Hao couldn't understand why the princess would speak ill of him. "When we face the emperor later, we'll explain everything clearly." Lu Hao and Ning Shu entered the palace together. Led by the eunuch, they arrived at the main hall. The eunuch went in for a while and then came out to let them in. Ning Shu stepped over the tall red threshold and walked into the main hall. He felt an indescribable sense of suppression and solemnity. Ning Shu lowered his head and followed behind Lu Hao with small steps. "Greetings to the emperor. Long live the emperor." Lu Hao knelt down and bowed. Ning Shu also knelt down and shouted, "Long live the emperor. Does the Lu family know why I am looking for you?" Lu Hao kept thinking. Hearing the emperor's voice, he did not seem happy. It was very tiring to read the thoughts of an emperor. Lu Hao felt that it had something to do with the princess entering the palace early in the morning. Had the princess told the emperor about this beforehand and told him that everything was done by Pan Wenlan? Why didn't she tell him beforehand? Lu Hao's heart was filled with thoughts, but he honestly said that he did not know. "You are Pan Wenlan. Greetings to the emperor, Pan Wenlan." Ning Shu's heart was also filled with thoughts. He guessed that the emperor was thinking the same thing as Lu Hao because everyone hoped that someone would come out and divert the attention. This was what everyone hoped for. "I heard that it was you who made the princess drink safflower." The emperor's face was cold. In an instant, a powerful aura pressed down on Ning Shu. Ning Shu went with the flow and prostrated himself on the ground, not speaking. Lu Hao was a bit shocked. The princess did not drink safflower. However, Lu Hao immediately restrained his emotions. Perhaps it was the princess's strategy to use this matter to lead to other matters. Ning Shu said, "Whatever the emperor says is true." The emperor's expression was not good. "Did I wrongly accuse you?" "No, emperor, you are right." "Then why did you hurt the women in the backyard and make the princess drink safflower? There are very few poisonous women like you in the world." Ning Shu was speechless. Did he not blush when he said this? "Your daughter was the poisonous one." Fine, she was poisonous, but the person who made the request was not poisonous. At most, he was a coward. Ning Shu said, "Whatever the emperor says is true." Lu Hao quickly gave Ning Shu a look. Confessions were not like this. He had to tell the emperor all the crimes. Ning Shu raised his head and stared at the emperor with deep eyes. "If the emperor wants me to sacrifice myself to save the face of the imperial family, I have nothing to say." "How dare you look directly at the emperor?" Eunuch Qian's sharp voice rang out. Only then did the emperor recover from his deep eyes/BK. Chapter 2569. This is the first time this subject's wife has seen the emperor's face, and there won't be another chance like this in the future, so this subject's wife dares to see the emperor's face. Ning Shu kowtowed, "Can the emperor leave this subject's corpse intact? Also, this subject's husband knows nothing about this matter, so please don't vent your anger on him. It wasn't easy for my husband to go from a country boy to a pillar of the country." "The emperor, you've already said everything, what else do you want him to say?" The emperor coughed, "So you admit that you did all these things in the inner courtyard?" This subject's wife said, "Whatever the emperor says is true." Ning Shu prostrated on the ground with an expression that said, "Do whatever you want." Lu Hao tightly furrowed his brows, then knelt down with a plop. "Emperor, this subject's wife came from the country and has shallow knowledge. She only did this because of jealousy and hatred. Please be lenient." Even the princess endured the pain in her stomach and came to the main hall. She knelt down and cried, "Father Emperor, you must uphold justice for your daughter." It seemed that her previous FFF didn't work. At the critical moment, these two people were still singing the same tune. Even though the princess seemed to hate Lu Hao, when it concerned Lu Hao's future, she didn't dare to make a fuss. So what if she was the princess? Here, the husband and wife were honored. The princess, whose body was hurt, now had to cling to Lu Hao even more, not to mention that the two of them had a daughter. The emperor only felt a headache. Looking at Ning Shu prostrating on the ground, he said lightly, "Lock up Pan Wenlon for now." Ning Shu was very calm. He had thought of this when he entered the palace. Two guards grabbed Ning Shu's arms, one on the left and one on the right, and dragged Ning Shu away. Ning Shu looked at Lu Hao and said, "Husband, as long as you're well. Emperor, please leave my corpse intact." Ning Shu was locked up in the prison. There was a damp and stinky smell in the room. When these prisoners saw Ning Shu, they all laughed. Xiao Chui was guarding the palace gates. Seeing that only the master came out and no young miss, her heart beat like thunder. Something must have happened to the young miss. Stealthily, he slipped away. According to the young miss's request, these little beggars began to sing the nursery rhymes that they had made up. In the nursery rhyme, Lu Hao loved power and married the princess. The princess had harmed so many people, but he wanted his wife to take the blame. His child was killed by the princess, but he could only watch helplessly. They were afraid of offending the princess. Seeing the princess harm so many people, they didn't dare to say anything. They were afraid of offending the emperor and losing their glory and wealth. The nursery rhyme was catchy and had a high popularity. For this nursery rhyme, Ning Shu had almost exhausted all of his artistic cells. Moreover, she could play games and skip rope while singing. He couldn't possibly kill all the children who were singing these things, right? Furthermore, some children did not even know where the songs came from. Just like when he was young, he listened to the songs but did not know where they came from. These songs could cause Lu Hao's lofty image to crumble. He didn't even dare to call her a princess after she miscarried his child. He even said that he would risk his life for his woman. When Xiao Chui arrived at the jewelry shop, she asked the shopkeeper to close the shop and hide for a while. At the same time, she asked the shopkeeper to find the old master and tell him not to come to the capital. The young miss came out very quickly. Of course, these things were all instructed by the young miss. Most of the valuable items in the fu were moved to the shop. Some of the valuable items were used as banknotes. Xiao Chui carried a food box with a sumptuous meal inside. She nodded at the prison guard and said that she was only here to deliver food. Xiao Chui walked into the prison and saw the idiot in the prison staring at her and laughing. It was dirty and smelly, very disgusting. Thinking that the young miss was going to be locked up here, Xiao Chui's heart was about to break. Young miss. Xiao Chui saw that Ning Shu was dressed in brocade clothes but sitting in such a dirty place. She felt that the young miss really had a hard life. Ning Shu opened her eyes and walked in front of Xiao Chui. Xiao Chui quickly opened the food box and handed the bowl to Ning Shu. "Young miss, eat something first. This servant has already done what the young miss said." Ning Shu chewed on a drumstick and said, "Since you've already done it, then hurry up and leave this place. Find a place to hide. You probably won't have good days when you return to the fu. I'll give you the slave contract later. Young miss, Lu Hao is a heartless man." "Enough, it's useless to say this." Ning Shu grabbed the dried grass on the ground and wiped her hands. She took out the slave contract. "Take it. Thank you, young miss. But this servant will wait for young miss to come out. Ning Shu finished all the food in the food box and then told Xiao Chui to leave quickly. Xiao Chui took the food box and left. Ning Shu burped and then sat cross-legged to cultivate. The food that she ate had a trace of energy, but it was very small. Ning Shu waited here for the matter to ferment. It was not rational to go against the feudal ruling class with the greatest power. Ning Shu had to weigh whether he could win against thousands of soldiers and horses. Even if he could win against thousands of soldiers and horses, where was the person who commissioned him? All the land under the heavens belonged to the king. Where could he escape to? The person who commissioned him would probably be scared to tears when he returned. The princess's greatest support was the emperor. If something happened to the emperor, the princess would lose her support. Ning Shu rubbed his chin and thought. Should he be poisoned to death or struck by lightning? Or struck by lightning? The ancient people were superstitious. But how could he summon lightning from the heavens? Even if he pointed at the heavens and scolded them, there might not be a reaction. Ning Shu spent his days leisurely in the prison, but the situation outside was not good. Firstly, the nursery rhyme had spread throughout the capital. Even the courtiers were talking to the emperor about it. Secondly, the princess's abdominal pain was very painful at the beginning. Although it was not that painful now, it was still painful. It was so painful that she could not eat or sleep well. When she heard the nursery rhyme, she was even angrier. The women in the backyard were all in danger. None of them had a higher status than the princess. If something happened one day, would they also be pushed out to take the blame? Although they did not like Pan Wenlon very much, with Pan Wenlon's personality, she would not do such a thing. And such a big project, poisoning and doing all kinds of things, Pan Wenlon did not have such power. She felt some regret in her heart. She thought that she had married a good man. She did not expect that Lu Hao was no different from other men. But they had already married Lu Hao. There was no other way out in this life. If the princess was here, they would live in fear of being controlled by the princess for the rest of their lives. They would be pushed out to take the knife at any time. Pan Wenlon had been with Lu Hao for 10 years, but Lu Hao still made a choice after weighing the pros and cons. But if something like this happened in the future, they might be the ones to be abandoned. Especially the madams who had low status in the backyard. They were even more uneasy. Some of the noble ladies went back to their parents' home to cry. It was such an obvious thing. Was the emperor still protecting the princess? Was there still any law? Was he going to let the princess do as she pleased? /BK Chapter 2570. Sometimes, power made people feel helpless. The most honorable person in the world was the emperor. If he wanted to protect someone, what could you do? Moreover, this matter wasn't enough to cause a commotion in the imperial court. It was just a family matter of a fourth-rank official. At most, they could say that Lu Hao didn't manage his family well and that he shouldn't think about his future. The emperor also had a headache. A family matter could be messed up like this. Now, the outside world was saying that he was an incapable ruler. Good things didn't go out, but bad things would travel 1,000 miles. The things he did that benefited the country and the people were all covered up by this matter. His daughter cheated her father and cheated her husband. If he didn't deal with it impartially, he would be an incapable ruler. Lu Hao, fuck. Was it a trend to look for a father recently? The princess looked for a father, and the women in the backyard all looked for a father. These women's fathers were either nobles or high-ranking officials. When they saw him, they all picked on him, ignored him, or mocked him. How good was Lu Hao's reputation before? How bad was Lu Hao's reputation now? Everyone knew that he covered up the princess' crime. You even pushed your wife out to take the blame. You're great. Forget it, you even made it known to the whole city. What glorious thing did you do to make such a big fuss? Lu Hao was very worried that the emperor would turn this matter around because of public opinion. If Lu Hao felt a little guilty towards his wife, Pan Wenlan, then now he only hoped that this matter could be settled. Carrying the food box to the prison cell, he saw his wife sitting in a pile of dry grass. Her clothes were already dirty. Husband. Ning Shu looked at Lu Hao. Lu Hao's appearance made Ning Shu's heart cold. Although she didn't leave the prison cell, she could more or less guess the situation outside. Lu Hao probably came to deal with her. Lu Hao had the prison guard open the prison cell door and carried the food box in. Lu Hao didn't mind at all. He sat on the damp grass like Ning Shu. There were some insects and rats crawling in front of him. In short, this was a place where one couldn't step on. How could Pan Wenlan, who had never suffered much since she was young, endure this? Lu Hao felt his heart go numb, and he felt a lot more empty. However, there were some things that couldn't be taken back. Lu Hao opened the food box and placed the plate on the ground. He took out a pair of chopsticks and handed it to Ning Shu. Wenlan, eat something. Ning Shu looked at the sumptuous dishes and asked, "Is this my last meal?" "No, I'm here to see you." Lu Hao shook his head. Ning Shu shook his head. "Hubby, I can't eat such greasy food. The food I've been eating here hasn't been good recently. I'm afraid I won't be able to take it if I suddenly eat greasy food. What if there was poison in it?" Lu Hao wanted to kill his wife. "Then drink some soup." Lu Hao scooped out a bowl of light soup from the soup pot. Ning Shu didn't refuse, but when he took the bowl, he didn't notice that the bowl of soup fell to the ground. Ning Shu immediately apologized, "Sorry, my hand was a little shaky." "It's all right." Lu Hao wiped the soup off his body and said to Ning Shu with melancholy, "If I had a choice, I'd rather be an ordinary couple with you, working from dawn to dusk. I won't let you suffer like this. It's starting again." Ning Shu didn't buy this kind of warm-hearted talk. Ning Shu only listened. In the end, he recalled Lu Hao's memories and said, "Hubby, don't worry. I'll remember everything you asked me to do." Lu Hao's memories were stuck in his throat. In the end, he talked about the situation and how the outside world was talking about him. The current Lu Hao wasn't below one person. No matter what the people said about him, it was fine. However, he was only a fourth-rank official now. He wasn't at the stage where he could cover the sky with one hand. In short, you should commit suicide. You're committing suicide to escape punishment. Ning Shu, what right did Lu Hao have to insult people like this? She was here for the future. Besides, she could still cultivate in the prison. Because she was the wife of a fourth-rank official, no one did anything to her. Ning Shu didn't say anything. Lu Hao thought that Ning Shu agreed and took away the plate. He deliberately left a chopstick behind. When Lu Hao left, he looked hesitant. After pausing for a moment, he strode away. Ning Shu played with his chopsticks. The client could really get rid of this man. Not to mention relying on him, but at the crucial moment, he would take the bullet for her. Moreover, there was a first time and a second time. Who could take being abandoned time and time again? Maybe Lu Hao hesitated and couldn't bear it, but in the end, he made a choice. When the benefits were big enough, one could give up. This matter became more and more serious. Lu Hao was affected badly. The emperor told him to stop working and reflect at home. Ning Shu was also locked up. He didn't let her out or execute her. He just dragged it on. Dragging it on. However, the officials were unhappy. They wanted the emperor to punish their daughter. Even if the emperor did punish her, he would still settle the score. However, the women in the family were making a fuss. They said that they used the face cream from the princess shop and were sick all over. Pushing out an innocent woman wasn't enough to vent their anger. To be able to become the wife of a big family, the daughters they raised weren't fools. If they couldn't see the situation clearly, fighting in the backyard would only result in death. On the other hand, the censor used Lu Hao's lack of discipline to attack the princess. The censor was punished for not saying anything. The emperor felt that if this matter dragged on, it wouldn't be a problem. He might as well solve it. Hence, one morning, Ning Shu was brought out of the prison and changed into a clean set of clothes to meet the emperor. The princess and Lu Hao were also in the court. In just 10 days, the princess had lost a lot of weight. Even her cheekbones were popping out. Her face was pale and her forehead was covered in cold sweat. Ning Shu calmly knelt down and bowed. When Lu Hao saw that Ning Shu didn't commit suicide, his expression became a little twisted. He felt that this brat didn't keep his promise. He said that he would commit suicide but he didn't do it. The emperor asked for the opinions of the officials present. Most of them wanted to punish the princess. Some people protected Lu Hao for their daughters or sisters. If Lu Hao became a useless person, the girls in their family would also suffer. Ning Shu's hands were in his long sleeves. He clasped his hands together and formed seals. As for whether or not he could set the palace on fire, no one knew. Ning Shu absorbed the power of the blazing sun. If the power of the blazing sun was used properly, it could burn some objects. Who would it burn? Of course it would be the man on the dragon throne. The officials argued back and forth. Some honest officials said that there was a problem with Lu Hao's character. Some said that the princess didn't deserve to be a wife and was crazy with jealousy. Lu Hao and the princess didn't look good. They seemed to have become street rats that everyone wanted to beat up. The princess felt indignant. She was a princess. These people's glory and wealth were all given by her father. They were the servants of the royal family. How could a servant question the master's actions? /BK Chapter 2571. After much discussion, the courtiers all knelt on the ground. Either way, one of them had to be punished for this. The more they were pressured, the more unhappy they were. The emperor was the same. He pointed at Ning Shu. Didn't this guilty woman already admit that she did it? You guys are making a ruckus. Why are you interfering in other people's family matters? Courtiers, Ning Shu prostrated on the ground. Emperor, you're right. With a flick of his sleeve, waves of fiery energy flowed from the ground to the emperor's shoes and pants. Then punish the guilty woman, Pan Wenlon, Emperor, you're on fire. The eunuch's sharp voice interrupted the emperor. Help! The emperor looked down and saw that his pants and clothes were on fire. He hurriedly patted them with his hands. Emperor, Emperor, the courtiers were also shocked. There was a fire for no reason. At this time, they couldn't care less about the etiquette and rushed to help the emperor put out the fire. Father! The princess's legs turned to jelly and she almost fell to the ground. If anything happened to her father, no one could protect her. Lu Hao also rushed to put out the fire. At this time, he had to do something to redeem himself. Although many people came to help put out the fire, it didn't go out. Make way. The eunuch rushed over with a basin of water. Everyone hurriedly made way and poured the water on the emperor. The emperor was drenched. Fortunately, the fire was put out. The eunuch immediately knelt down and apologized. The emperor wiped the water on his face. He didn't blame the eunuch, but he still had some lingering fear. Why was there a fire? The emperor was suspicious. He felt that this was a warning from the heavens. Of course, there were also conspiracy theories. They felt that someone wanted to assassinate him and put something flammable on his clothes. It was the hottest day of the summer, and the friction between the clothes could easily catch fire. The emperor quickly changed his clothes and asked someone to check if there was anything wrong with his clothes. The emperor, who had changed his clothes, sat on the dragon throne again. He felt that the dragon throne was also smeared with something. He sat on it very uncomfortably. The emperor didn't have the mood to deal with this matter. He directly said, "Demote Lu Hao to be the county magistrate of Mountain Stone Town. He can't return to the capital without a summons. His servants and wives will go with him." He was demoted from a power seeker to a small official who was in charge of a town. Moreover, this Mountain Stone Town was a rather chaotic town. The people there were tough and valiant, and their dream in life was to be bandits. There was no way to manage them, but it wasn't worth it to send troops to wipe them out. This was equivalent to directly depriving Lu Hao of his future. He didn't say anything about punishing the princess or Ning Shu. He just threw them far away and told them not to make trouble under his nose. "Father." The princess knelt on the ground and begged her father. She, a princess, was actually going to a remote village. How could she bear this? "Shut up and stop talking," the emperor said directly. "Your Majesty." Ning Shu said. "What do you want to say now? Don't be ignorant. Please allow this humble girl to divorce Lu Hao. Only the princess is compatible with Lu Hao. When Lu Hao wanted to marry the princess, this humble girl should have stepped down." A mocking expression appeared on the emperor's face. "What, seeing that Lu Hao is no longer a fourth-rank official, you want to abandon him?" Ning Shu's expression didn't change as she said, "Even if Lu Hao is no longer a fourth-rank official, even if he's just a county official, he's still an official. If this humble girl follows Lu Hao, she's still the wife of an official. After this humble girl divorces, she's just a divorced girl. I'm not young anymore, and I'm still the daughter of a merchant. How can such a status be compatible with the wife of an official?" Ning Shu's meaning was that if she could be the wife of an official, why would she be an abandoned woman who was laughed at by others? The vanity you spoke of didn't exist at all. Don't even think about putting this hat on her head. Lu Hao still hadn't recovered from the blow of being demoted. Now, this wife who had been with him for 10 years actually wanted to divorce him. Then what he had done before was just a joke. It was as if he had forced her to confess, and in the end, she wanted to divorce him. Damn it! As long as this emperor was on the throne, he wouldn't be promoted. He didn't know if the next emperor would remember him. Most likely, he wouldn't. He was back to before he was liberated. Moreover, it was a place where it wasn't easy to achieve merits. Not to mention merits, fighting wits and bravery with these unruly people every day was tiring. Even the safety of their lives couldn't be guaranteed. Lu Hao and the princesses' faces were ashen. The emperor didn't want to care at all. "Then I grant you a divorce from Lu Hao." "Thank you, Your Majesty." This matter was considered over just like that. After court ended, Ning Shu left the palace. When she arrived at the shop, the client's father had already entered the capital. Seeing Ning Shu, he kept saying, "It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back." Ning Shu's tears couldn't help but flow out. This was the reaction of this body. She wiped her tears and said, "Father, I've divorced Lu Hao. It's fine if you've divorced. Father will take care of you. If I knew Lu Hao was this kind of bastard, I wouldn't have married you to him. Let's not talk about this. Miss, you're back." Xiao Chui also cried. The more Minister Pan thought about it, the angrier he got. Logically speaking, the Pan family didn't mistreat Lu Hao. Moreover, Lu Hao became rich, but they didn't get any benefits from him. They also didn't use his power to flaunt everywhere. How could he treat his daughter like this? Minister Pan heard about this from Xiao Chui. Every time he thought about Lu Hao, he felt like he was going to explode. There's no need to go. Since there's nothing between them, there's no need to be entangled. Just wait for the system to leave the body. Lu Hao would no longer exist. The husband that the princess fought over would be gone. Lu Hao sorrowfully packed his things and went to work. He might not be able to come back in this lifetime. He would never be able to come back. The group of women in the backyard were all stunned. What? The old master was demoted to a small official. Moreover, he was going to a remote place. What should they do? Some people who loved their daughters found an excuse to bring their daughters home. They didn't want to go to a remote place to suffer. Although they would be criticized behind their backs, it was better than suffering. There were also some women who were willing to follow Lu Hao. At the very least, they were the wives of officials. Lu Hao was under a lot of pressure recently. He didn't complete the system's mission and jumped a level. In the end, he became a small official, far away from power. The chances of him climbing back up in this lifetime were very small. He was so angry. He felt like he had been cheated. Lu Hao felt that since things had already reached this point, he couldn't change anything. He might as well change his method. When he reached Mountain Stone Town, he would use the money given by the system and the money he earned from these years to start a rebellion. This way, he would be able to become an official faster. Moreover, when he became the emperor, he would be the boss. Why would he need to suck up to his father-in-law? /BK Chapter 2572. Lu Hao had a new goal and quickly became spirited. All roads lead to Rome. If there wasn't this path, he could take another path. However, after dropping so many levels, the system had taken back many things that it had given him, such as retentive memory and super memory. Relying on these skills, Lu Hao noticed many details. Whether it was when he interacted with his colleagues or what the woman in the backyard said, he remembered them all very clearly. If his colleagues had anything to say, he would remember it in his heart. Next time, he would bring what his colleagues needed. This feeling of just casually saying it, but you remember it in your heart, was really too good. It made people feel that they were valued. Now that he didn't have these skills, Lu Hao felt that his memory had become blurry. He couldn't remember many details, and his mind became blurry. He couldn't even remember the 4 books and 5 classics that he had read before. This made Lu Hao a little unhappy. Now, he had to start from the beginning again. Lu Hao adjusted his mood. As long as the system was here, he would be able to make a comeback very quickly. However, the princess was in a very low mood. She had been forced to drink red flowers by her husband, and now, she had been abandoned by her father. Although her father didn't punish her, he made her leave the capital and never return to the capital again in this life. In the past, there had been princesses who had been sent to a barbarian land for political marriage. The princess thought that such a fate wouldn't fall on her head. However, the current situation was no different from sending her to a political marriage. Her father was impatient with her. However, she was really wronged by someone. It was that woman in the backyard. However, no matter how much he cared, her father wouldn't take back his order. Her father was probably more worried about who had tampered with his clothes. He didn't care about his daughter at all. Ning Shu returned to the Lu residence and went to the courtyard to get things. He also went with Lu Hao to the yamen to get the divorce papers done. Only by getting the divorce papers done could it be considered a divorce. Lu Hao saw Ning Shu and said coldly, "Are you happy to have caused the Lu residence to be like this?" Ning Shu immediately put on an aggrieved expression. "Lu Hao, how can you say that? I'm willing to die for your future. It's just that when I was in prison, I thought it through. If I were still alive, I would divorce you. I couldn't bear to see you put one woman after another into the backyard. I was clearly the main wife, but you demoted me to a concubine. If it weren't for the fact that you didn't want to offend the princess, would you say that the women in the backyard were equal? If the princess is the main wife, will you say that all the women in the harem are equal? Lu Hao, so you're jealous? If your woman has many men, will you be jealous? How is this the same?" It was indeed different. Since ancient times, men had always harbored the desire to capture all the beauties in the world. Actually, this was determined by their genes. They instinctively wanted to pass down more of their genes. There's no point in discussing it now. Once you get the divorce papers, you can make the princess your first wife. Kill this bitch for me. The princess rushed over and pointed at Ning Shu. Beside her were several guards with swords. The guards pulled out their swords and Ning Shu walked over. The princess's face was pale and she had lost a lot of weight. Because the pain in her abdomen had lasted for a long time, she was tormented. At this moment, looking at Ning Shu, her face was full of hatred and disgust. Lu Hao frowned and stopped the princess. Don't make a fuss. Even if he wanted to start a rebellion, he needed to leave the capital and go to Mountain Stone Town for a while. He also needed a good reputation. Now that Pan Wenlon was killed, what was this? The princess somewhat broke down and shouted, Lu Hao, are you still going to protect her? She patted her chest weakly. I'm a princess. I've done so much for you. You can't even see it. Why are you protecting her? She was abandoned by her father. Now, she had to go to a remote village and never see the prosperity of the capital again. It was bad for her body. The princess felt wronged. Ning Shu's face was indifferent. Everyone felt wronged. She was the one who felt wronged. She even had to take the blame for these two bastards. The guards stood motionless. They didn't know what to do, so they just stood there. No matter how disappointed the emperor was with his daughter, he knew that the atmosphere in Mountain Stone Town wasn't good. He still sent a pair of guards to escort her. At this time, it wasn't a bad thing to stay away. But the princess couldn't feel it. The pain in her body made her lose her mind. It reminded her at every moment that she was forced to drink red flowers by her husband. Now, her husband was still protecting this woman. Jealousy made people dizzy. Let's go to the yamen. Ning Shu said to Lu Hao indifferently. You're not allowed to go. The princess shouted. I'm going to write the divorce papers with Lu Hao. Are you sure you don't want him to go with me? If you don't go, I'll always be Lu Hao's wife and you'll always be his concubine. The princess's words were stuck in her throat. Also, it's best if you don't fight with me. I've already written my will. If I die, even if you kill me, don't try to hurt my family. My family has all written their wills. Small commoners like us don't deserve to die. But if the emperor knows that you're so cruel that you killed an entire family, I don't know if he'll still recognize you as his daughter. He might even kill you. You. The princess was so angry that her liver hurt. She was so angry that her whole body trembled. She kept cursing. Ning Shu ignored her and turned to leave. Lu Hao walked out the door with her. When I went to see you in prison, why didn't you do it? She didn't directly commit suicide. Ning Shu said indifferently, even ants drag out their lives. I want to go through a trial. If I die, I have nothing to say. But if I don't die, I want to divorce you. How could Lu Hao not hate this woman in his heart? Since she wanted to divorce, then so be it. In this era, women who divorced would be criticized behind their backs. Let's see if you continue living like this. Lu Hao thought that one day when he became the ruler of the world, this woman would definitely come back and beg for his forgiveness. Because it was the emperor who ordered the separation, it was done very quickly. The two of them had nothing to do with each other anymore. They were no longer husband and wife. After leaving the government office, Ning Shu left. He was not afraid that these people would dare to fight with him, unless Lu Hao didn't want to leave the capital. When he returned to the shop, Squire Pan had already arranged to sell the shop. He probably wouldn't come back to the capital in the future. He packed up his things and prepared to leave the capital. Outside the gate of the capital, he met a Jianghu man dressed in black with a sword. Squire Pan patted his shoulder and introduced him, "This is Hua Yang. He's a Jianghu man. This time I asked him to protect us home. I can't live in the old place anymore. I moved to another place." Apparently, Squire Pan was a little afraid of the princess's revenge. Lu Hao's revenge. Squire Pan liked to make friends. If someone was in trouble, he would like to help. Lu Hao was like this before. This Hua Yang was injured and met Squire Pan. This time, he probably came to return the favor. Chapter 2573. Most of the people who were loyal to their friends were not loyal to them. How could Lu Hao remember Squire Pan's kindness to him? They were not related to each other. It was rare that Squire Pan could be so kind to him. Lu Hao might not remember. Ning Shu immediately bowed. "Thank you, Mr. Hua." Hua Yang said greedily, "No need." Ning Shu and Xiao Chui got on the carriage. Hua Yang and Squire Pan got on the horses and left. Ning Shu looked at Xiao Chui and said, "Didn't I give you the slave contract? Why don't you leave? I've been with Miss for so long. Miss treated me very well. I can only be a slave and serve others. I want to serve Miss more." Ning Shu lifted the curtain and asked, "Father, where will we live in the future?" "I found a place. It's beautiful. No one knows us or you. Don't worry about people talking nonsense," Squire Pan said. Ning Shu thought, what a good father. If it were his parents who were not so open-minded, they would have scolded her. No matter how bad her life was, she could not be abandoned by her husband's family. No matter how hard it was, she could not be abandoned by her husband's family. "I'll listen to you." The place Squire Pan chose was a little far from the capital. He probably thought that the farther he was from the capital, the less he would know about the nonsense. After a few days of traveling, they would stop to cook some soup and pancakes at night. Hua Yang hunted some game and barbecued some meat. He just sprinkled some salt on it. It tasted very good. Hua Yang was a man of few words. He usually kept a straight face. But he was very responsible. He would watch over everyone every night and occasionally take a nap. After 10 days of traveling, they finally arrived. It was a small town. Squire Pan bought a small courtyard. It was well decorated and had a garden. It was very exquisite. "This will be our home in the future." Squire Pan said directly, "I've sold all the land and shops. We can buy more things in the future." Ning Shu smiled and said, "I'll listen to father." Squire Pan looked at Ning Shu, then turned to Xiao Chui and said, "Hurry up and make some soup for Wenlan. She must have suffered in the prison." "All right." When Hua Yang heard that Ning Shu had been in prison, he couldn't help but glance at him, but he didn't show any expression. "Brother Hua Yang, you should also stay here for a few days. It must have been hard on you. Take a rest before you go back." Hua Yang nodded in agreement. Squire Pan didn't want to upset Ning Shu, so he didn't mention Lu Hao or He Li. On the other hand, Ning Shu felt that his days here were really comfortable. He ate well and his complexion improved. Occasionally, he would lean against the window and watch Hua Yang practice his sword. He had some skills. Most of the Jianghu people here were probably at this level. If that was the case, she could be considered an expert. She hoped that the person who commissioned her could continue cultivating after returning. It was always a good thing to have power to protect one's body, and spiritual energy could also nourish one's body. His body had been injured before, and he even applied some facial cream. He needed to slowly recover. Even if He Li Fuchen divorced, it didn't mean that he wouldn't meet the right person in the future. Maybe he would even have children. Ning Shu studied the map, looking at the situation of Mountain Stone Town and how long it would take to reach Mountain Stone Town. However, the map was hard to understand. It must be Mountain Stone Town. If it was far away, Lu Hao's system would be stripped off. 2333 wouldn't be able to devour the system from such a long distance. At the dinner table, Ning Shu said to Squire Pan, "Father, I want to do business. I want to sell goods outside the Great Wall. I want to bring back the fur and gems outside the Great Wall. The tea leaves and silk here are very popular over there. The profit would be very high." Squire Pan put down his chopsticks, shook his head and said, "No, it's too dangerous. There will be bandits along the way, and those people outside the Great Wall. They are tall and strong. Sometimes, they will rob directly. Besides, it's not peaceful outside the Great Wall. I don't trust a weak girl like you to do such a thing. It's too dangerous." Huayang, who had been keeping a straight face, said, "The environment outside the Great Wall is very bad. It's either yellow sand or extremely hot. I've traveled to these places. It's not a place you can go." Ning Shu said, "I'm not a weak girl. I'm very bored in the Lu mansion, so I practice martial arts." Xiao Chui, who was standing to the side, was shocked. "When did Miss practice martial arts?" "I practice before going to bed at night." When Squire Pan heard this, he felt that his daughter lived a lonely life in the Lu mansion every day. Otherwise, she wouldn't be so bored as to practice martial arts. Huayang's straight face looked even more serious now. "If you practice martial arts like this, you will go crazy. Practice is nonsense." Did she think that she could become a master who could leap over roofs and vault over walls with just a little practice? "I can protect myself." "Really? I've been practicing martial arts for almost 5 years. I can leave my handprint on a rock." Ning Shu walked out of the hall and came to the rockery. She hit the rockery with her palm and left a very shallow handprint on the rockery. Squire Pan was stunned. He couldn't believe it. He could only ask Huayang, who was an expert beside him, "Look at her." Huayang frowned. "She has some inner strength." Ning Shu grabbed Squire Pan's arm and shook it hard. She wanted Squire Pan to agree to let her run the business. The most important thing was that they had to pass by Mountain Stone Town on their way to the Great Wall. Mountain Stone Town was closer to the Great Wall. While doing business, she could also pay attention to Lu Hao's situation. Otherwise, if the system was disconnected, 2333 wouldn't be able to reach it. Squire Pan was dizzy because of the shaking. "Stop, stop. I'm still worried. You can hire a few guards who are good at martial arts." "The more I think about it, the sadder I feel. The more I think about it, the more I want to cry. Father, what should I do in the future? If I don't do something soon, I won't be able to vent my anger." Squire Pan's face was full of guilt. It was his fault for marrying his daughter to that kind of person. "Brother Huayang, I'll have to trouble you with this. How much do you want? Help me protect her." Huayang glanced at Ning Shu. "Sure. I'm going to travel anyway, so I'll take you along." Ning Shu was very happy. Things were going well. These few days, he bought a lot of tea leaves and cloth. Half of them were made of cotton, and the rest were of better quality. Then, he pulled a few carts and prepared to leave. Squire Pan stuffed some money into Ning Shu's pocket. Ning Shu didn't accept it. "I have money with me." The jewelry he had bought over the years had earned him a lot of money. Squire Pan stuffed the money into Huayang's hand. He asked Huayang to take good care of his daughter and buy whatever she wanted. He also asked Xiao Chui to follow along. She could help take care of her daughter, wash her clothes, and serve tea. Ning Shu sat on the back of the horse and bent down to lift Xiao Chui's chin. He looked at her and said, "Xiao Chui, you don't have to follow us. The wind is strong outside the Great Wall. Don't blow your delicate skin." Xiao Chui was speechless. "Miss is so naughty." Chapter 2574. Miss, aren't you going too? I'll follow you to take care of you. Xiao Chui felt that there was no reason for her to be more delicate than her miss. Besides, it was rare to be able to see how the people outside the pass lived. Besides, wasn't Hero Hua here to protect everyone? As for her miss saying that she knew martial arts, Xiao Chui didn't believe her at all. She must be lying. She could convince her master, but not her. Ning Shu said casually, "All right, it'll be a tough journey. Follow me if you want." It was convenient for ancient people to travel and they rarely went out, let alone women who stayed in the backyard. The group of people and a few carriages headed out of the pass. Xiao Chui sat in the carriage while Ning Shu sat on the horse. He wore a curtain hat to cover his face. Traveling in ancient times was slow and difficult. At night, they had to set up camp. If there was a town, they could stay in a room. If they didn't reach the town, they could only sleep in the wild. There were many wild animals. At night, it was either the howling of wolves or the cries of other strange birds. Everyone took turns to be on duty to avoid dangerous situations. It took them more than a month to reach Mountain Stone Town. The closer they got to the border, the more desolate it felt. The crops didn't grow much and it looked especially lonely. "Hey, stop. I planted this tree and opened this road." Ning Shu was speechless. There were indeed many bandits in Mountain Stone Town. As soon as they got close, they encountered bandits. Why didn't they say that everything belonged to them? "Ah, there's a young lady." Xiao Chui stuck her head out and saw the bandits. Her face immediately turned pale. She didn't know if Lu Hao and the others had reached Mountain Stone Town or if they were killed by bandits. However, there were armored guards. Even if these bandits were brave, they wouldn't dare to approach. They were simply courting death. Hua Yang's face was stern. A cold aura exploded from his body. He pulled out his sword, stepped on the horse's back, and leaped over. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. These bandits relied on their numbers. Now that Hua Yang was fighting many of them, these bandits couldn't fight back. Hua Yang directly cut off the tendons in the hands of these bandits, which was considered to be sparing their lives. However, they would no longer have the ability to commit crimes. The group swaggered past the bandits. Ning Shu jumped off his horse and asked a bandit who was covering his wrist, "Have you seen a group of guards escorting someone over?" "I don't know." Ning Shu stepped on the bandit's wrist, causing the bandit to wail in pain. Yes, I heard that the county magistrate was appointed." Ning Shu lifted his foot and rubbed it twice on the ground to wipe off the blood on the soles of his feet. This meant that Lu Hao had already taken office. Ning Shu flipped onto the horse's back and let the group start moving. He said to Xiao Chui, "Wear a hat too." "Okay." Xiao Chui obediently put on the veil hat to cover her face. "Why did you only cut the tendons in their right hands?" Ning Shu asked Hua Yangwen. "With only one hand cut off, they can still live. They can find a new job, and they won't starve to death." Hua Yang said greedily. "Can they survive with their left hand?" "Why not? My right hand was injured, so I used my left hand to practice swordsmanship." Ning Shu said, "Then aren't you afraid that they'll rob you with a knife in their left hand?" "If I see them again, I'll definitely kill them." Ning Shu just grunted and entered the town to find an inn to stay. After packing up, Ning Shu put on the veil hat and went to the county office. This county office was very run down, and the plaque on the door was a bit crooked. It was clear that the people of this town didn't care about the county office at all. At a glance, the evil people in this town were very evil. It was normal for them to bully and dominate the market. The evil officials were no different from bandits. The cowardly people were very cowardly. Their stalls were often destroyed, but they didn't dare to say anything. In such a poor and backward place, there were only country bumpkins. He didn't know if the princess could stand it. Of course she couldn't. The princess couldn't stand it at all in this small county office. It was run down and small. Even the women who followed Lu Hao here couldn't help but be speechless when they saw such a poor place. How could they survive in such a place? They ate vegetables 3 times a day. In the past, they ate expensive food, but in this place, even rice was considered a luxury. Lu Hao, the county magistrate, was just a figurehead. Anyway, the entire county office was under the control of a ruthless official like the advisor. When they collected taxes, it was just to line their own pockets. They would also increase all kinds of taxes. Although Lu Hao felt that this place was difficult to manage, from another perspective, it was also a good opportunity to help the poor people overthrow the violent control. By punishing these evil officials, the people who couldn't survive without food would naturally listen to his orders. Lu Hao had always been planning to find a suitable opportunity. However, during this time, he was buying people's hearts and doing all kinds of things for the people. He even led the people to rebel against the bullies who oppressed them. In a short time, Lu Hao already had many supporters in Mountain Stone Town. If there was anything, they would come to Lu Hao. Ning Shu was eating in his room. When he heard this, he just curled his lips and didn't say anything. "He's a good official," said Huayang. "Even if he's a good official, he's still a heartless man," Xiao Chui immediately retorted. Huayang was stunned. He wasn't a gossipy person and didn't know much about Miss Pan. When he heard Xiao Chui say heartless man, he was instantly confused. Clearly, they weren't on the same page. Ning Shu pondered. Lu Hao really wanted to be a good official and climb up step by step before returning to the center of power. However, in his situation, it wouldn't be easy to climb back up. It might even take decades. Even if he made some achievements, it might not reach the ears of the emperor. Unless, sometimes, the emperor thought of his daughter and thought of him. However, hoping that the emperor would think of him, Lu Hao could wait. Could Lu Hao's system wait? Ning Shu had a bold idea. That was that Lu Hao might be planning to rebel. Even if he was an extremely important official, how could it be as carefree as being the ruler of the world? He believed that Lu Hao's system would agree. The emperor's providence was definitely much better than an official's. That was the providence of a country. However, it wasn't possible for Lu Hao to gather a rebel team in a short time. Hence, Ning Shu decided to go outside the pass to trade for things before slowly dealing with Lu Hao. After staying in Mountain Stone Town for a few days, the team set off again. During this time, they encountered a few waves of bandits. Ning Shu didn't understand. In this remote village, everyone was a bandit. Who were they robbing? No one was producing. Even if they were bandits, they would still be poor. If they wanted to rob a caravan going outside the pass, these caravans would definitely have guards and experts. These bandits wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Chapter 2575. The bandits' tendons had all been cut by Huayang. These were all very unprofessional bandits. There should be more regular bandits in this area. Hopefully, they won't encounter them. As soon as they left the border city, they heard the sound of the wind blowing, as well as the sand blowing in their faces. Well, the desertification of the land was a bit serious. Pay attention to the greenery. Ning Shu and his group went to the place where the nomads gathered to exchange things. Fortunately, it didn't rain during the journey. Otherwise, the cloth and tea would be wet and the trip would be in vain. When they arrived at Sand City, it was very lively. It was a trading place. Ning Shu paid some money and prepared to find a place to wait for the guests. Exchanging tea and cloth for more valuable things was a matter of mutual consent. These people ate greasy food and didn't have fruits and vegetables to relieve the grease. Tea was the best thing. The cotton cloth absorbed sweat and was comfortable to wear. After a while, someone came to ask about Ning Shu's tea and cloth exchange. Ning Shu used a roll of cotton cloth to exchange for a red fox fur. The other party used a crimson agate stone to exchange for a caddy of tea, but Ning Shu gave one more tale. Huayang stood at the side with his sword and raised his eyebrows. The price difference was too big. Although he knew the profit was high, he didn't expect it to be like this. At first, Xiao Chui was more reserved. Later, she began to greet the guests. Ning Shu thought that these things would take a few days to exchange, but he didn't expect them to be so popular. They were exchanged in a day. The tea and cloth were exchanged for gems, jade, and animal fur. Of course, there was also a half-grown child who was not wearing any clothes and only had a piece of fur wrapped around his lower body. He brought a bowl of something black and came over to trade with her. "You child, what is this?" "I won't exchange." Xiao Chui saw the black thing in the bowl. It was very sticky. Ning Shu saw that it should be oil. If this thing was in the future, it would definitely be developed. But now, there was little knowledge about it. "What do you want to exchange for?" Ning Shu asked. The child was very uneasy. He didn't expect Ning Shu to be willing to exchange. "Cloth, 2 rolls of cloth." The child said. Ning Shu gave him a roll of cotton cloth and some tea leaves. Thank you, thank you." Ning Shu took the bowl and looked at the oil. "Miss, what is this? What was the use of something black? It didn't look good and couldn't be eaten." "It's all right. Just treat it as a new toy. I've seen this kind of thing before. I've seen some people use it to light up their houses and cook their meals." In the end, he was a chivalrous person who had roamed the Jianghu and was very knowledgeable. Ning Shu felt that it was a pity. It was such a waste to ignite the fire directly. However, before the start of the mechanical age, things like oil had no place to be used, and not much of it would be wasted for cooking. In the future, all the cars in the world were supplied by this. After exchanging their items, they headed back. This trip was worth several times the profit, but the risk was a little high. If they were slightly weaker, they would have been robbed by the bandits and lost both their money and their lives. However, the high profits made people scramble for it. After returning to Mountain Stone Town, Ning Shu felt that the atmosphere in the town was different. There didn't seem to be any bullies running amok. Ning Shu and his group stayed at the inn. When they had nothing to do, they heard gossip about the county magistrate killing another bully. As the rumors spread, the county magistrate was almost a peerless hero. When they heard that the county magistrate's wife was a princess, they became even more mythical. In any case, a rebellion needed a name and an opportunity, just like Lu Bang killing White Snake. Ning Shu collected useful information in the town when he had nothing to do. He heard a lot of gossip, such as that the county magistrate's private advisor Ding liked children. In other words, he had a fetish for children. When he went to the surrounding villages, the poor families would either rob or buy children with good features. When he brought them back, those children would soon die. Ning Shu, in a place like this, where the emperor was far away, an evil official like the private advisor was like a local tyrant. Not to mention a private advisor, even a village head or village head was like a local tyrant. Therefore, Ning Shu chose this private advisor. He wrote a letter and asked someone to send it to the capital as quickly as possible. However, there were many bandits around Mountain Stone Town, so he needed someone who knew Kung Fu. "I know the head of an escort agency. He's good at Kung Fu. If he can deliver the letter, he'll definitely be able to do it," Huayang said greedily. "Ning Shu, you know a lot of people." Huayang pulled a long face. "Why are you slandering him? Is it because he once let you down, so you're using this method to get back at him? He's a good official who works for the people. You can't do this just because of personal grudges." Ning Shu shook his head. "I'm not a narrow-minded person." He's definitely going to rebel. If you don't believe me, let's do an experiment. You can disguise yourself and say that you're a bandit. You don't want to be a bandit anymore and want to seek refuge with him. But do you think he'll take you in when you've killed hundreds of people? That's hard to say. If he's really a good official, he'll definitely kill me, a person whose hands are stained with innocent blood, Huayang said methodically. Then let's do an experiment. The county magistrate is thirsty for talents now. Then it's not a bad thing to take in the bandits and protect the people. Are you going to watch the bandits harm the people? Huayang and Ning Shu started a debate. Ning Shu was too lazy to say more and let him experiment on his own. I have an evil private advisor by my side. Why didn't I see him deal with him? He even killed his own child. The nation is doomed. The next day, Huayang put on a disguise. He stuck a beard on his face, revealing only his eyes. He went to the county government and said that he wanted to see Huayang. Huayang was personally received by the county magistrate, Lu Hao. Huayang saw that Lu Hao was so handsome, just like a noble young master. Thinking that he and Pan Wenlan used to be husband and wife, he felt a little strange. How could she bear to part with such a handsome husband? Appearance was very important. Even if it wasn't good, he had to have some temperament to make people have a good impression of him. But in the end, Huayang left the county government with a complicated expression. When he returned to the inn, Ning Shu was leisurely drinking water. You look a little sad. His worldview had collapsed. Lu Hao was a person controlled by the system. Did you really expect him to have the resolve to save the people of the world? In terms of resolve, Lu Hao wasn't as thoughtful as a Jianghu wanderer. Huayang only said, I didn't expect him to be someone who fishes for fame. What a waste of his good looks. Then can you find that head of bodyguards? If you can't, I want you to help me send him to the capital. Ning Shu said worriedly, I'm actually very worried that the people of the world will be caught in the flames of war. The world is still considered peaceful. If it's caught in the flames of war, how many people will become homeless? Even if a dynasty was rotten, there would naturally be people who would overthrow it. But right now, it wasn't rotten yet. Xiao Chui was speechless. She felt that Miss had become a drama queen. Chapter 2576. Huayang's face was stiff and lifeless. He didn't know how to laugh or cry. His gaze was as sharp as a sword. He silently looked at Ning Shu, who was clutching her chest with a pitiful expression. Although her words were righteous, she couldn't change her behavior of going against her ex-husband. I'll send you a letter. Who will protect the merchant group? Huayang said stiffly. His voice was flat. Ning Shu immediately patted his chest and said, Of course it's me. I'm also a master. Don't think that I'm going against Lu Hao. As the advisor, I'll tell the court that Lu Hao is rebelling. That advisor has a fetish. If he finds out, Lu Hao will definitely kill him. Then we'll have one less person to deal with. Secondly, the bandits in Mountain Stone Town are a scourge. Just say that Lu Hao is colluding with these bandits and preparing to rebel. When the time comes, the court will send troops to destroy these bandits. The emperor could tolerate corrupt officials, but he definitely couldn't tolerate people who wanted to rebel. Lu Hao, the advisor, and the bandits had all been dealt with. Killing 3 birds with 1 stone, why not do it? The bandits in Mountain Stone Town weren't that big. Sending troops to destroy them was making a mountain out of a molehill. However, it was different if someone recruited bandits to rebel. The emperor would definitely send troops to destroy these bandits. They weren't just bandits anymore. They were traitors. Huayang was speechless. Scheming bitch. Ning Shu felt that he was going down the path of counterfeiting. Huayang took the letter and said, I'll send it to the escort agency and come back. Ning Shu reminded him, be careful on the road. Give me more money. Problems that could be solved with money weren't big problems. Ning Shu leisurely drank tea. Xiao Chui said hesitantly, Miss, what do you want to say? Xiao Chui shook her head. I wanted to say that one night together as husband and wife means endless devotion, but when I think of what he did to you, I can't say it. Rebelling would implicate 9 generations of the family. When the time comes, will it implicate you, miss? I've already received an edict to divorce him. Well, we have nothing to do with each other. He ate and drank when he should. However, during their stay in the town, Ning Shu clearly felt that someone had set their eyes on these goods. He reckoned that once they left the town, they would be robbed in the wilderness. Someone was scouting, and it wasn't just a group of people. Ning Shu was speechless. This time, she was only experimenting with some goods. The main point of the matter was to deal with Lu Hao's matter, so she used the excuse of carrying goods to cover it up. After a day and a night, Hua Yang returned. He was travel-worn. Ning Shu immediately complimented him, Hero Hua, you've worked hard. Being able to do something for the people is not considered a hardship. Hero Hua is so righteous. Wenlan admires you. Hua Yang glanced at her. You're not bad yourself. You're worried about the world falling into the flames of war. She could place righteousness before family. Ning Shu cupped his fists. Well said, well said. Xiao Chui was speechless as she watched the two of them flatter each other. Xiao Chui asked, since it's done, miss, when can we go back? Let's wait a little longer. There were some things that needed to be stirred up. Xiao Chui was very sad. She felt that miss was playing with fire. If they continued to stay here, Lu Hao might discover them. There were also so many animal furs and gemstones that were worth a lot of money. The travel-worn Hua Yang washed up, ate something, and went to rest. Ning Shu wore a curtain hat and walked around the streets. He bought some small things and inquired about the county government. The conditions here were not good. The wind and sand were stronger than usual. When the beautiful madams came here, they would probably be blown into wrinkled radishes. They were used to the prosperity and delicateness of the capital. They probably would not be able to adapt to the rough life here. Especially the princess of the royal family. He didn't know if the princess knew that Lu Hao was going to rebel. On one hand was his family, and on the other hand was his husband. It was a dilemma. Lu Hao probably didn't dare to tell the princess and did it secretly. Ning Shu returned to the inn and wrote another letter. A few days later, Hua Yang disguised himself as the bearded bandit again and took the letter to the county government. Hua Yang went straight to the point and threw the letter to Lu Hao. Lu Hao took the letter and read it in shock. The more he read, the angrier he became. Don't drag me into whatever you want to do. I have so many brothers in the mountains who don't want to rebel. They just want to make a living. I robbed a caravan and found it on an escort. I've already killed the caravan. Don't worry, the news shouldn't have leaked out. The private advisor beside you is probably someone who wants to splurge wealth. If he reveals to the imperial court that you want to rebel, he will be rewarded handsomely. Hua Yang said coldly. Lu Hao crushed the letter into a ball. He was shocked and angry. He had done it secretly. How did the private advisor find out? But he looked at the bearded Hua Yang suspiciously. Why are you helping me? Am I helping you? I just want to live. If this news leaks out, the imperial court will send troops here. How can I stand the destruction of the army? Lu Hao's expression relaxed. Thinking of private advisor Ding, a murderous look flashed across his eyes. Paper can't keep fire. It seemed that he had to speed up the process. Lu Hao tried to recruit Hua Yang again, wanting to take him under his command. Ordinary poor people would never rebel unless they couldn't survive. These bandits were much bolder. He promised a bright future. Huayang pretended to be hesitant and said that he had to go back and think about it. After all, he had to be responsible for his brothers in the mountains. After Huayang left, Lu Hao took the letter and angrily led a group of people to Private Advisor Ding's mansion. The private advisor bought a large piece of land outside the town and built a manor. He was one of the richest families in the town. At this time, Private Advisor Ding was playing with a child. When he saw the people who suddenly rushed in, he was furious. "What are you doing? Can't you see that I'm busy?" Seeing this, Lu Hao frowned in disgust and put the letter in front of him. "I didn't expect Private Advisor Ding to have such great ambitions. You didn't hesitate to slander me." Private Advisor Ding was confused. What the hell was this? After reading the letter, he jumped up. "This wasn't written by me at all. It's not even my handwriting. Someone is obviously framing me." The private advisor was shocked. This county magistrate dared to rebel. He was just a county magistrate. Lu Hao pulled out a snow-white knife and walked towards the private advisor. "Since you already know, then use your blood as a sacrifice." They were rebels anyway. Silencing them would slow down the spread of the news. He had to fight for something for himself. Private Advisor Ding immediately knelt down and explained that he was loyal to the county magistrate. He was willing to do his best for the county magistrate until his death. Even if he wanted to rebel, he would do it. Chapter 2577. But Lu Hao obviously didn't believe him. He had betrayed him in order to survive and would probably report to the imperial court. This kind of person was a ticking time bomb. The advisor saw the murderous intent in Lu Hao's eyes and was furious. He couldn't figure out who had framed him and was shocked by Lu Hao's audacity. He actually wanted to rebel. Even someone as evil as Advisor Ding didn't dare to think about rebelling. Lu Hao didn't hesitate and stabbed the saber into the advisor's chest. Blood spurted out onto Lu Hao's hand. Lu Hao's heart trembled. This was the first time he had killed someone with his own hands. Back then, even if he had to let his wife take the blame, he would have let her commit suicide. He wouldn't let his hands be stained with blood. But this time, he had spared the advisor. There would be endless trouble in the future. It was either you die or I die. There was no choice. After Lu Hao mentally prepared himself, he ordered people to drag Advisor Ding's body away. Advisor Ding had operated in Mountain Stone Town for so many years and had a certain amount of power. Lu Hao saw that there was a confused child beside him. His expression was blank. This child must have heard their conversation. Children were the easiest to talk to. Seeing this child being sent away, he might have spilled the beans. Lu Hao walked towards the child with his saber covered in blood. The child's eyes were filled with horror and fear. He kept retreating but couldn't say anything. Lu Hao pressed the blade against the child's tender neck and cut his hand. Warm blood splashed onto his face. Lu Hao closed his eyes. He knew he couldn't go back. After burying the child's body, Lu Hao thought that he had to find a way to recruit bandits. But these bandits were all from his own mountains and were unruly. They didn't care about the government at all. After that, Lu Hao hung the advisor's body at the Meridian Gate for the public to see. He said that the advisor was corrupt and had taken things by force. He also promised to return the land that the advisor had taken to the people. Lu Hao was instantly shed with tears of gratitude by many people. They kowtowed and called him their lord. The advisor is already dead. Fortunately, we've gotten rid of a disaster, Huayang said stiffly. Huayang said stiffly. Looking at the woman who was drinking tea, he felt that she was exceptionally skilled at sowing discord. These rich young ladies were too scheming. Ning Shu said, "Don't look at me like that. I'm doing a good deed for the people. After Private Advisor Ding dies, those beautiful children won't have to suffer in the future." There will be one less person who has the power to cause trouble everywhere. Miss, you're amazing. That private advisor Ding deserved it. Xiao Chui poured more tea for Ning Shu and said to Hua Yang unkindly, isn't Mrs. Method good? People like you who only know how to fight and kill will definitely be wanted by the government if you kill the advisor. Now this matter has nothing to do with us. Ning Shu nodded and praised, little Chui is right. Not only did he have to achieve his goal, but he also had to be independent. Hua Yang was baffled. Did he say something wrong again? Why did the two women suddenly have such a big opinion of him? Hua Yang changed the topic stiffly. When are we going back? If we delay for too long, your father might think that something has happened to you. Ning Shu said, it'll take some time. I'll write a letter to father. Hua Yang, what are you going to send? Ning Shu. A letter to home. What do you think I'm going to write? Private Advisor Ding's letter would take more than a month to reach the capital. Even if it was rushed, it would still take more than 20 days to reach the capital. After the head escort arrived in the capital, he followed his good friend's instructions and sent the letter to the emperor at the palace gate. Of course, there were several letters that were sent to the imperial censor and some other officials. Not to mention how angry the emperor would be when the letter reached his hands. This Lu Hao, if it weren't for the princess, wouldn't even be a small official. Now he had started to cause trouble and joined forces with the bandits of Mountain Stone Town to rebel. The emperor had sent Lu Hao to Mountain Stone Town for two reasons. First, he was so angry that he wanted Lu Hao to suffer and govern Mountain Stone Town well. When the time came, he would find an excuse to bring Lu Hao back to the capital. After all, he was his daughter's husband. But now he was doing something like this. In Mountain Stone Town, it felt like he was the king of the town. The people only knew Lu Hao as Lord Qing Tian, but they didn't know who the emperor was. Some officials in the imperial court also cursed. Their daughters or younger sisters were women in Lu Hao's harem. According to the 9 generations, they were also part of the 9 generations. How could this Lu Hao be so demonic? He could even cause trouble for no reason. They were convinced. They hurriedly sent servants to inform their daughters to either run or commit suicide. In any case, they didn't want to implicate their families. Some families directly erased the names of their daughters from their genealogy to protect their families. This kind of in-law was deceptive. The emperor angrily issued an imperial edict and ordered the army guarding the border to send a portion of their forces to suppress the rebellion that was about to emerge. Lu Hao directly killed the princess was brought back. If she didn't want to come back, then so be it. In short, the journey back and forth, from the capital to the border to deliver the imperial edict, and after receiving the imperial edict, they still had to gather the troops and prepare the provisions. It would take at least 2 months. There was no other choice. There were no planes or cars in ancient times, so it took a long time to do this. Ning Shu thought it would take such a long time, so he might as well send the things back home and come back again. So he packed up and left. During this time, Lu Hao didn't even notice that his ex-wife was around him. Perhaps he didn't expect her to appear here. In the vicinity of Mountain Stone Town, they encountered several robberies. Moreover, there were 1 or 2 groups of bandits who had their tendons cut and recovered and started to cause trouble again. This time, Hua Yang didn't hold back. He directly killed these bandits who tried to rob again. These bandits were no match for Hua Yang's poison. Soon, corpses were everywhere. Blood rushed to the sky. Xiao Chui looked at Hua Yang in horror. She didn't expect this big prawn who was as hard as a sword to kill so quickly. Ning Shu just watched and didn't do anything. Ning Shu was very calm about the death of these bandits. But he secretly kept the souls of these bandits in the world of samsara. He could add a portion of soul power to his world, and also increase the number of living creatures in 9 Palace Mountain. It seemed that the 3rd world was still an empty world. It was very difficult to enter the third world. It might be a little difficult to enter the fourth city. In this case, she could only make waves on the first and second levels for the time being. The third level was empty and had no waves at all. Ning Shu kept the souls with a serious face. After Huayang killed all the bandits, they continued their journey. Xiao Chui vomited all the way. Obviously, her psychological quality was not strong enough. Ning Shu comforted her, "If you still want to follow me around the world, this kind of thing can't be avoided. Come on." But Xiao Chui didn't feel comforted at all. Instead, she vomited more violently. Chapter 2578. After traveling for more than a month, they were finally home. Squire Pan was so anxious that he almost pulled out his beard. When he saw Ning Shu, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he lectured her again and again. Xiao Chui's face was pale and she did not speak up for her mistress. Huayang held his sword and stood stiffly at the side without a word. Ning Shu said, "I'm hungry." When Squire Pan heard that his daughter was hungry, he finally stopped nagging her. He was both a mother and a father. She took the things she got back to the shop to sell. Squire Pan shook his head when he saw the good fur. He said regretfully, "If we were in the capital, we would definitely be able to sell it for a good price. The price would be several times higher." There were many high-ranking officials and nobles in the capital. Everything was good under the rule of the emperor. When it was almost time, Ning Shu bought some tea leaves and cloth. This time, she bought some porcelain. Porcelain was also something that people outside the Great Wall liked. Just like luxury goods, it was very satisfying to own one. However, Ning Shu gave up after thinking for a while. The situation this time would definitely be very chaotic. Porcelain was something that was easily broken and would get stained. The tea leaves she brought this time were all tea bricks, and most of the cloth was cotton. She was going to join in on the fun. Squire Pan saw that Ning Shu was going to run away again and was so angry that he almost jumped up. "You're going again?" "Yes, I think it's good. Father, I will support you in the future." Squire Pan was speechless. "Why are you talking about support at home? You're not relying on me to support you. How can I rest assured when you're running around like this? If you're going, who will protect you? Brother Hua helped you this time, but it doesn't mean that he will protect you in the future." Ning Shu patted her chest and promised, "Father, why don't you believe in me? I'm a master." Squire Pan laughed, Huayang said, "Brother Pan, I'll go with Miss Pan again." Huayang knew that she wanted to go to Mountain Stone Town. To be honest, he also wanted to see the situation. After all, he was also involved in this matter. Ning Shu held a gun in her hand and shot at Huayang with one eye closed. "You're a good man. You want to join in the fun." Squire Pan was speechless. "Thank you, big brother." Thus, the few people who didn't stay at home for long and the caravan set off again. Xiao Chui's face was pale. She gritted her teeth and insisted on going with them. However, this time, Ning Shu insisted on not bringing Xiao Chui. This time, the situation was quite dangerous. He patted Xiao Chui's head and said, "Be good and wait at home. Miss, I'll bring something good back for you." Xiao Chui's face was full of resentment as she waved her handkerchief to send Ning Shu off. Like this, the weather slowly turned cold. The cold wind blew, and Ning Shu sat obediently in the carriage, leaning against the charcoal fire. Huayang boasted that he was a martial arts master. He stood tall against the cold wind. Ning Shu could only cup his fists and express his admiration. As they approached Mountain Stone Town, the footsteps on the ground were messy. There were many horse hoofprints. Ning Shu stuck his head out of the carriage and looked at the footsteps. He said to Hero Hua, "I think the army has already entered Mountain Stone Town." Hua Yang looked at the footprints and the simple stoves left behind by the army. He calculated how many people there were. Ning Shu felt that 1,000 soldiers would be the most. Some bandits were just a mob. They were not a threat at all. Even if there were many bandits, they were no match for a regular army. Moreover, their numbers were not as big as the army. If there were 1,000 bandits in a mountain, the imperial court would have already come to eliminate them. This was a battle without any suspense. Mountain Stone Town was sealed off by the army. Entry and exit were strictly controlled. Ning Shu and her group wanted to go in, but all the goods had been rummaged through. Ning Shu had to give each of the guards a silver ingot before they were allowed to enter. This situation was obviously to take advantage of the situation. Ning Shu readily gave it to them. He didn't want to lose both the goods and the silver. When they entered the town, it was empty. There were no hawkers on the streets. The doors were closed, and even the windows were closed. Ning Shu found the inn from before and planned to stay there. The shopkeeper didn't want to receive guests. Seeing that Ning Shu was generous, he reluctantly allowed the caravan to stay. After drinking a cup of hot tea, Ning Shu asked the shopkeeper about the town situation. The innkeeper slapped his thigh. What a sin he had committed. He blabbered on and on in a low voice as he recounted the entire incident. The army arrived at Mountain Stone Town more than 10 days ago. When they arrived, they sealed off the town. Ning Shu was quite satisfied with the result. Now, Lu Hao was arrested. His wife and children were also arrested. The people of Mountain Stone Town had mixed feelings about Lu Hao. On the one hand, he did do something for the people. On the other hand, he gathered the bandits to rebel. If it wasn't certain, why would the imperial court send the army? It was good that the army eliminated the bandits. These bandits not only robbed the passing caravans, but also some villages. Especially when food was scarce, the bandits could only starve after stealing the food. Ning Shu curled his lips. Then he would stay here until the matter was over. He directly extinguished Lu Hao's ambitions in the cradle. The current Lu Hao could be said to have nothing. No food, no army, no army. His ambitions were also known in advance. Ning Shu released his mental power and covered the town. However, the town was very big. It was very difficult for him to reach the county office. He saw that Lu Hao and his wife were locked in a cage. The princess carried a child in a cage alone. The princess was so good. At this time, she still had preferential treatment and was alone in a cage. The princess carried the child. Her face was haggard and filled with disbelief. Her eyes were red, and her cheekbones were high. At first glance, it was impossible for this woman to be the princess. The princess never thought that there was something worse waiting for her. She thought that coming to this remote village was already the lowest point of her life. Now, she was a prisoner because her husband wanted to rebel. As the person who slept next to her, she didn't know whether her husband rebelled or not. These people far away in the capital and the border knew first. This was definitely a conspiracy. Lu Hao was definitely wronged. But now, there was no help. She couldn't see her father who was thousands of miles away. There was no way to defend herself. From the beginning of the matter until now, Lu Hao didn't say a word. He looked extremely dispirited. This made the princess panic. She felt that the future was dark. She felt as if she had stepped into a swamp. She could only watch helplessly as she sank. In the end, there was no ceiling. This feeling was too hopeless. The princess couldn't help but question Lu Hao. Lu Hao seemed to be immersed in his own world and didn't care about the princess at all. The other wives and concubines squeezed into a cage. They were crying in low voices. Why were their lives so hard? Even if they weren't beheaded, they would be sent to be slaves or even military prostitutes. The atmosphere of despair enveloped the entire county office. Chapter 2579. Ning Shu retracted her psychic power. She was sweating profusely and felt like her psychic power was about to dry up. The range was too wide. It was beyond her psychic power's tolerance. Ning Shu felt that she should strengthen her psychic power. Spiritual power was a great tool for peeping. If it was large enough, within a large area, everything would be under one's nose. She wiped the cold sweat off her forehead. Her head hurt badly. Her psychic power had reached a bottleneck. After expanding to a certain range, it could no longer be extended. The army that had exterminated the bandits had returned. They entered the town with a thick smell of blood. Everyone immediately closed their doors and windows. There was no one on the streets. Only the sound of horse hooves and soldiers could be heard. Ning Shu used her psychic power to scan the area. The leading general immediately pulled on the reins and looked around vigilantly. Who is it? Ning Shu quickly retracted his gaze. After all, the general had survived mountains of corpses and seas of blood. He was able to detect his psychic power. However, the feeling of being peeped on did not appear again. The general waved his hand and the troops continued in the direction of the county government. Huayang was a martial artist. He could smell the strong smell of blood from afar. It seems that the imperial court has made up their mind this time. They actually sent General Li. The bandits in Mountain Stone Town would probably disappear during this period. They must have been scared out of their wits by the army. It would take some time for them to develop again. Mountain Stone Town could be peaceful for a few years or even a decade. However, it was close to the border. It was a road that caravans had to pass through. Therefore, this profession would still flourish. Ning Shu asked 2333, it's already like this. That whatever system still hasn't left Lu Hao's body. Could Lu Hao still be alive? If so, Ning Shu would give this guy a thumbs up. His vitality was the most tenacious of all the hosts he had seen. Perhaps he had escaped and fled to other places to develop. For example, outside the Great Wall. If he developed, he could also attack this country. In any case, it was possible that he could escape. 2333, it hasn't left yet. This system was quite patient. It was going to be a great harvest. Some short-sighted systems would rush to leave and they realized that the situation was not right. This wasted a lot of energy and did not even return to its original body. Ning Shu could only wait for the system to leave Lu Hao. Perhaps the system would leave on its own and leave Lu Hao behind. This way, Lu Hao would still have a life. The black-bellied system directly devoured Lu Hao's soul. A more humane system. Let's find a new body and fight again. In short, no matter what the situation was, Lu Hao's situation was not good. After leaving his body, the system war began. Even Lu Hao could not escape the fate of being devoured. Every day, there would be troops searching everywhere. Apart from a portion of them going out to exterminate the scattered bandits, the rest would capture and kill some ruffians in the towns or villages as a warning to others. For a time, the atmosphere in Mountain Stone Town was unprecedentedly good. No one picked up anything that was left behind on the road, and there were no more cases of thievery. The commoners were all trembling in fear. The tyrant was also very afraid. He was afraid that someone would report him as a tyrant. Actually, he was also very gentle. Ning Shu was speechless. He felt that this General Li really had a personality. He probably wanted to completely change the atmosphere of Mountain Stone Town. It seemed that General Li was a tough general. It was a blessing for the country to have such a general. This was a typical cold-faced, cold-hearted general who cared about the world. He liked it. Li. The general was very obedient. After dealing with the bandits, he would kill Lu Hao and present the head to the emperor in the capital. Although the weather was already cold, when the head was sent to the capital, the emperor would probably see a rotten face. He hoped that after dealing with it, the head would rot slower. Lu Hao's face was ashen. The feeling of powerlessness grew stronger and stronger. Was he really going to die here? He was really unwilling. General Li carried a long spear and walked to the side of the cage expressionlessly. The princess shouted in panic, "Pai Lupi, if you dare to kill him, I will not let you off." General Li said indifferently, "Princess, I am not Pai Lupi. I am Li Feng. Pai Lupi, don't kill my husband. As an older sister, I am begging you. For the sake of our friendship since we grew up together." Ning Shu, who was watching the show, was speechless. Fuck, why do I feel that this Li heir and the princess have some past entanglements? Pai Lupi. Thinking of the 9-Palace Mountain Pai Lupi, he was an idiot. However, the Pai Lupi of the 9-Palace Mountain could only be reincarnated there. After all, the world of samsara was not connected to these planes of existence. Could it be that General Li and the princess, Ning Shu could imagine a melodramatic plot even with his eyes closed? General Li did not show any mercy. He directly pierced Lu Hao's chest with his long spear into his heart. Lu Hao's eyes gradually lost their light. General Li pulled out the long spear and Lu Hao's body fell to the ground. Ah! The princess looked at Lu Hao in disbelief. You killed him. You killed her. Pai Lupi, I hate you. Master, master. The other madams all began to sob. They were in despair. They had lost their pillar of support. General Li did not take the princess's words to heart. It doesn't matter if you hate me. You will be free once you leave him. Look at you, a princess, ever since you got together with him, you have been cursed by thousands of people. Your days are getting worse and worse. You are neither a human nor a ghost. But I love him. Pai Lupi, I hate you. Give my husband back to me. The princess wailed in pain. The little girl beside her, who was not even 2 years old, also began to cry. General Li's face flashed with a strange look. Finally, he calmed down. She was no longer the arrogant and beautiful princess. She was also no longer the older sister in his heart. This time, he took the initiative to come here to see her. The princess was his cousin. There was no way he didn't have any feelings for her. 2333, that's strange. The system did not leave his body. Ning Shu. Don't tell me it wants to revive Lu Hao. Lu Hao's soul does not seem to have left his body. Ning Shu's heart was itching. He wanted to immediately rush over and cut off Lu Hao's head. If he could still be revived like this, Ning Shu would be convinced. He double-tapped 6 sixes. 2333, it's most likely this plan. It would not easily change its host. This system is very well hidden. Ning Shu narrowed his eyes. He had a feeling that 2333 had struck gold this time. He had met an old fox system. Who knew how much luck and souls it had stolen? General Li planned to cut off Lu Hao's head. The princess immediately begged him, Pai Lupi, I beg you. Leave him a whole corpse, please. General Li frowned and did not say anything. However, he did not immediately cut off Lu Hao's head. Ning Shu, go, 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 Hua Yang's face was stern. He looked at Ning Shu from the corner of his eyes. He was scratching his head. It was winter, but he was so anxious that he was sweating. He asked carefully, are you having epilepsy? Chapter 2580. Epilepsy. Ning Shu looked at Huadaxia with some pity. This guy was destined to be alone for the rest of his life. Talking like this was like telling a girl, you're good at everything, but you like to laugh like a pig. Asking people to talk like this, Of course, there was no guarantee that one day when he saved the beauty, the girl would rush to repay him with her body. Ning Shu squeezed out a hee-hee from his throat, ignored him, and continued to look at the situation. Ning Shu was so anxious that he wanted to help and cut off Lu Hao's head. The longer he delayed, the higher Lu Hao's chances of survival. He didn't know what method the system used to imprison Lu Hao's soul in his body. It was probably using energy to repair Lu Hao's soul again. If Lu Hao's luck was better and more dramatic, his heart would be on the right side, and he would be able to survive. Ning Shu facepalmed. This princess really came out to mess things up. Now that the princess was living like this, it was most likely that her luck had been plundered. Luck was one reason why she was living so miserably. On the other hand, it was possible that she was muddle-headed because of love. Even if Ning Shu didn't come, who knew what the princess's fate would be like in the future? Lu Hao seemed to be full of love, but he was actually cold. There was no love at all. The princess cried and begged not to cut off Lu Hao's head, and to leave Lu Hao's corpse intact. General Li didn't agree or reject. He was probably very conflicted. Ning Shu, Li Dada, you're going to hand the head to the emperor. Don't cheat. Take out your upright military bearing and reject her. As time passed, Ning Shu also gave up. It seemed that General Li was going to be biased for the princess cousin this time to say goodbye. Seeing the princess crying with tears and snot, she looked especially pitiful. Anyone who saw her would feel pity for her. It seemed that General Li still had some feelings for the princess. Ning Shu sighed and held his chin. Everything would be solved if he just cut off the head. Now he had to track Lu Hao's corpse. In the end, as Ning Shu expected, General Li didn't cut off Lu Hao's head. Instead, he replaced it with a bandit's head. Of course, he found someone with a face similar to Lu Hao's. She combed her hair into the same bun as Lu Hao and inserted Lu Hao's hairpin into her bun. Rolling the skull into the lime, it was white and seeping. It was hard to see the exact appearance of the skull unless one used their hands to pat off the lime on the skull. The emperor wouldn't do anything. In any case, he should be able to hide it. Furthermore, General Li felt that Lu Hao's heart had already been pierced by a spear and he couldn't be any more dead. Who would have thought that Lu Hao would still be alive? Thank you, Pai Lupi. The princess wiped her tears and looked at the lifeless corpse. Her heart was numb from the pain. General Li asked, is the princess going back to the capital? Why would I go back? Imperial father killed my husband. What can I do? I can't kill Imperial father to avenge him. General Li said, Princess, be careful with your words. The emperor said that you can return to the capital or stay here. The princess snorted with a fake smile. Her face was filled with grief and sarcasm. I'm not going back. I'm going to protect him. Everything I have in this life is with him. My glory is with him. My heart is with him. General Li pursed his lips and dealt with the other wives and concubines with a cold face. These people were all demoted to servants and were recorded as slaves. They basically wouldn't be able to turn over a new leaf in this life. The madams cried uncontrollably. Among them, there were a few madams with good family backgrounds. They were all dead set on following Lu Hao because they believed that Lu Hao would be able to stand up again. When he returned to the capital, he would definitely be an existence that people looked up to. He would definitely be able to go back and slap their faces. However, they didn't expect that there would be no low point in life. They were originally young ladies of noble families, but now they were actually being sent to be slaves. How could they bear this? The young ladies who didn't do any household chores, and even some of the lowly singers and dancers, wouldn't do such menial and tiring work. Their task was to sing and dance and serve the nobles. The ladies felt that their future was dark. They didn't even know when they would be tortured to death. They might even be bullied and humiliated. Or they might end up in a brothel and have a pair of jade-like arms that could be pillowed by 10,000 people. Just thinking about it made them tremble in fear. If they knew that it would be like this, they definitely wouldn't have followed. At this moment, they suddenly felt envious of Pan Wenlan, who had divorced Lu Hao long ago. Thinking about it, she really had nothing in this life. Her body was ruined by the princess. She didn't even have a child. Her husband even had to share with so many people. She refused to be the mistress of the house and ran over to be a man's concubine. She lowered her status and had nothing. Suddenly, she felt some hatred for Lu Hao, who had died and left this group of helpless women behind. These madams were all taken away. It was also because General Li was strict in his management of the army. If it were any other army, these madams would have been bullied and humiliated long ago. General Li repeatedly asked the princess if she wanted to return to the capital. If she didn't return to the capital, she could follow him to the border. This way, he could help take care of the mother and daughter. The princess' daughter wasn't even 2 years old now. With an orphan and a widow, it was easy for her to be bullied. The princess shook her head and rejected General Li's good intentions. To her, it was the same no matter where she went. There was no joy in this life. Lu Hao was dead. A corner of her heart had already collapsed. Gradually, her entire heart would collapse. She would be lifeless. Even if she was alive, she would be a walking corpse. General Li wasn't a talkative person. His suggestions were repeatedly rejected, so he didn't say anything else. He packed up everything and prepared to return to the border. Before he left, he saw her guarding the corpse. Fortunately, it was winter, so the corpse didn't smell in a short time. The child next to her sat in the snow and cried, but the princess didn't seem to hear. General Li picked up the child and patted the snow off her body. The princess stiffly turned her head and said to General Li in a hoarse voice, "Pai Lupi, can you take her away?" General Li instantly understood the princess's intentions. If she gave the child to him, he would probably have to follow this man. General Li directly refused. "This is your child. Of course, you have to raise her. In the future, you have to prepare a dowry for her. You have to see her live a peaceful and beautiful life." As a mother, she was strong. If he really took the child away, her cousin would have no more worries. Wouldn't she be determined to die? Thinking that this man was the executioner who killed Lu Hao, if she gave the child to him, it wouldn't be good for her to acknowledge the murderer as her father in the future. The princess didn't say anything about entrusting the child to him. General Li had to return to the border, so he left behind some gold, silver, and jewels. These were all copied from the mountain bandits. It was enough for the mother and daughter to live the rest of their lives without worry. The princess only asked General Li to take it back. She wouldn't use a needle or a piece of thread from this man. General Li pursed his lips, but he also knew that the little bit of affection that they had grown up together was gone. /BK Chapter 2581. On the day of the march, General Li waited outside the town for a long time, but the princess didn't come out, so he rode away. To Ning Shu, as a bystander, General Li was actually a good man, but he didn't express himself much. Lu Hao was a man of this era who knew how to say a few flirtatious words. But girls liked these things. So it formed a routine. Flirting was reaching out to girls. Since ancient times, deep love couldn't keep the heart of a person, only a routine. Since you like to hear it, then follow this routine. Ning Shu didn't dare to relax. His spiritual power was focused on Lu Hao's body. Lu Hao didn't wake up. His face was pale, like a dead person. After using his spiritual power all the time and being tired, Ning Shu would rest for a while before checking. He wiped the sweat off his head. He felt that his body was hollowed out and his head hurt. Hua Yang looked at Ning Shu strangely more than once. How could he sweat so much in winter? Sweating in winter consumed yang energy and couldn't hide essence energy. Did you go crazy? Huayang thought about it and could only think of this possibility. She seemed to have some inner strength. Ning Shu. I'm just afraid of the heat and wore too much. Huayang didn't say anything else. Let's go, follow me. Ning Shu left the inn first. Because the army left, the town was lively again. Ning Shu shuttled through the crowd. Huayang followed her closely. Ning Shu used his spiritual power to see the princess wipe Lu Hao's body, put on mourning clothes, and use a cart to pull Lu Hao's body out of the town. Obviously, she was looking for a place to bury Lu Hao's body. Ning Shu had to know where Lu Hao's body was buried. When the time came, he would cut off Lu Hao's head. He couldn't drag it out for too long. What if Lu Hao revived again? This kind of pay-to-win player with a resurrection armor was really annoying. Snowflakes fell from the sky, and the cold wind whistled. The princess pulled the cart and walked aimlessly against the whistling cold wind. A girl less than 2 years old sat on the cart beside her father's body. She was young and didn't know what was going on. Although she was a princess, her future was destined to be bad. To some extent, the mother and daughter's luck was gone. They were supposed to be princesses and infanta, living a life of luxury. Of course, this was partly because of Ning Shu. When they arrived at a forest, the princess used a shovel to dig the snow. The ground was frozen and very hard. It was not easy for the princess to dig a hole. However, the princess insisted on digging a grave for Lu Hao. Her palms were bleeding from the friction of the shovel. This scene was particularly touching. Huawei watched from afar and said, although she has done a lot of wrong things, she is a steadfast woman. Ning Shu, don't use love to cover up everything. It seems like as long as she is loyal to her love, she can do anything. It was as if Guan love was pardonable. Should he let go of his hobby? Ning Shu coldly said, she is indeed very loyal. Do you believe that she will abandon her daughter and commit suicide? Dying for love, how beautiful. Huayang looked at Ning Shu's indifferent expression. You don't seem to care. It's not that I don't care, but the princess is like a gambler who has lost everything. Suicide was very normal. It was like a stock trader who lost everything overnight and jumped down from the building. Abandoning his family. The princess gambled on her feelings. She gambled that she had married a good husband, a good man who was second to none in the world. She invested a lot. As a princess, she married a small official as a concubine. She lost her reputation and pride. Secondly, she had to share her husband with so many women. Now, her husband was dead. She lost everything emotionally and had nothing left. One was a loss of money, and the other was a loss of feelings. If she could not bear it, she would naturally kill herself. Ning Shu understood this feeling very well. Ever since the peerless martial arts had been destroyed, she had been gambling every day. However, as time passed, Ning Shu calmed down. If the peerless martial arts could not be preserved, Ning Shu felt that he should be able to continue. After all, there was the world of reincarnation, and then the world of living beings. He did not know if there would be a world of faith in the future. Huayang had nothing to say. What could he say when he met a scheming bitch who was good at talking? Ning Shu and Huayang silently watched the princess dig the soil with a huff and puff. Ning Shu gathered his clothes. The wind was blowing so hard that his face hurt. Huayang felt that the girl's body temperature was too unstable. She was sweating one moment and shivering the next. Ning Shu was very bored waiting. The princess finally buried Lu Hao's body. Seeing such a deep pit, Ning Shu felt really speechless. She would dig it out again later. It was really tiring to bury and dig it out. After Lu Hao's body was buried, Princess Huayang sat in the snow with a numb look. The child was calling for her mother. The princess said to the child, "Nan Nan, let's go back." The princess put the child on the handcart and pulled it away. In the cold wind, she left without looking back. Huayang said stiffly, "She didn't commit suicide." Ning Shu said, "Are you stupid? She should have settled her child. Hurry up and dig the grave." "Why? He is dead. Why do you still disturb his soul? A dead man is like an extinguished lamp. Everything should be written off." Ning Shu's face was unfathomable. "I don't care about stupid people. Was Lu Hao the kind of person who died like an extinguished lamp? The soul didn't leave the body, nor did it go to the world of samsara. What kind of person was that? Hurry up, hurry up. Who knows when she will come back?" Hero Hua had never done such a shameful thing like digging someone's grave. Seeing her digging so hard, how much hatred did she have? She didn't even let the dead go. She was crazy. The princess dug a little deep. Ning Shu jumped into the pit and threw Lu Hao's body directly. The body fell at Hero Hua's feet. Huayang frowned coldly. She was incorrigible. How could she profane a corpse like that? Ning Shu climbed out of the pit and pushed Lu Hao's body away. He found that the wound on his left chest was much smaller. Although his flesh had been torn apart and his skin was deathly pale, the wound had shrunk a lot. Now the wound was like being shot by an arrow instead of being pierced by a spear. The wound was at least the size of a baby's fist. Ning Shu put his hand on Lu Hao's chest and moved his arm. The muscles were still soft and didn't show the stiffness of a dead person. Then he leaned over and put his ear on Lu Hao's chest. He felt that Lu Hao's heart was beating very weakly, and it beat for a long time. If he didn't observe for a long time, he would definitely think that Lu Hao was dead. "Come and see." Ning Shu waved to Huayang. "No. /BK." Chapter 2582. He didn't have the hobby of tarnishing the dead. Playing with corpses didn't respect the dead at all. Even enemies shouldn't insult corpses like this. Ning Shu. He's still alive. Huayang didn't quite believe it. A dead person was buried in the ground for at least an hour. Are you kidding me? Huayang squatted down to take his pulse and then listened to his heartbeat. He was shocked. Could this be the legendary tortoise breathing technique, the fake death technique? Ning Shu. Then what do you want to do? If Huayang remembered correctly, this man was her husband, a night of husband and wife, 100 days of grace. But how did she know that her husband wasn't dead? Could it be that he faked his death to avoid the imperial court's pursuit? Ning Shu smiled and said, "Of course I have to get rid of this scourge for the country and the people. If he's alive, he will definitely take revenge." Huayang. But although he's my ex-husband, if he's alive, he has a deep hatred for this country and will definitely take revenge in the future, Ning Shu said worriedly. Huayang, a woman's heart is the most vicious. Ning Shu pulled out Huayang's sword and pointed it at Lu Hao's neck. Lu Hao was still unaware, as if he didn't notice the approaching danger at all. Ning Shu didn't hesitate and wanted to cut off her head with the sword. In an instant, Lu Hao opened his blood-red eyes and dodged Ning Shu's sword with a sidestep. Lu Hao flipped over and stood up. His feet were off the ground and his body was floating. Ning Shu immediately realized that this Lu Hao wasn't the Lu Hao of the past. The system was controlling his body. This system was the calmest system Ning Shu had ever seen. At this time, it still hadn't left the body. No matter how bad the situation was, it didn't rush to escape. It probably wanted to fight back. Although the spring was at its lowest, the rebound force was definitely strong. The system probably still wanted to let Lu Hao live and then annex this country step by step to become the ruler of the world. Huayang felt that what was happening now was making his worldview a little shaky. Floating in the air like this, how could a Qin Gong be able to step on the snow without leaving a trace, unless it was a bird with wings? Even if one were to leap onto roofs and vault over walls, one would still need a point of support. This person was floating in the air and did not need a point of support. Ning Shu held her sword and drew a beautiful sword flower. Then, she attacked Lu Hao with a swish. "I'll chop off your head and see how you resurrect." Ning Shu swooshed, and the system allowed Lu Hao's body to avoid the attack. If any vital parts were injured, it would still need to use its energy. This was Ning Shu's first time fighting against the system. In the past, the system would always break away and then fight against the system. Ning Shu's fighting spirit surged, and the sword in his hand danced even faster. It was difficult for the system to control Lu Hao's body to avoid these injuries. Unable to fuse with his body, he couldn't do as he pleased. Soon, Lu Hao's clothes were torn to shreds. He infused the remaining energy in his dantian into his sword and sliced it across Lu Hao's neck. The cut was neat, and Lu Hao's head was chopped off. The head fell to the ground, and the hot red blood dripped onto the snow. Even without his head, Lu Hao's body was still floating and did not fall. Huayang stood far away and watched, his face blank. What the hell was this? He still didn't break away at this time. Was he going to use the headless corpse to plunder luck? Be careful not to get cremated. 2333, leave further away. It's definitely going to break away. It's probably going to cause a big commotion. Ning Shu, can you do it? A man has to do it even if he can't. A man. Oh, 2333 is actually a man. Ning Shu's mouth twitched, and he grabbed the head and hid further away. He also threw the head into the pit. Later, he would have to throw Lu Hao's body in to bury it. After all, they were husband and wife. The system broke away from the headless corpse, and Lu Hao's body fell directly onto the snow. Ning Shu quickly ran over, threw the body into the pit, and quickly buried it. Gradually, a strong wind blew around, and sand and stones flew. There was also a cracking sound when something touched each other. They almost fainted from the shock. The wind blew so hard that they couldn't even open their eyes. The huge sound waves and movement directly destroyed the surrounding trees. Ning Shu and Huayang directly lay on the ground, holding their ears tightly. Ning Shu used spiritual energy to seal his ears, isolating them from the huge sound waves. Next to him, Huayang vomited blood. Ning Shu injected some spiritual energy into him. Ning Shu originally thought that it would be over soon, but he didn't expect the movement to get bigger and bigger. Even the ground began to tremble, like an earthquake. The sound waves became louder and louder, radiating to the surroundings with the two systems as the center. Many trees were cut in half and fell down like building blocks. Fortunately, this place was quite a distance away from the town. Otherwise, under such sound waves, one's brain and ears would be destroyed. He didn't know how long it would take. The power of this system was beyond Ning Shu's imagination. He didn't know if 2333 could handle it. Ning Shu didn't have a clear idea of 2333's strength at all. Well, she didn't know much about 2333. She didn't even know if his companion was a trash or a super god. She usually had a playful look on her face. Ning Shu waited and waited. Her body was covered with a layer of snow. The battle was still going on, and the ground was shaking especially hard. If this continued, maybe the crustal plates would shake and there would be problems. At that time, there would be an earthquake somewhere. Could 2333 do it or not? She didn't want to lose herself and then become a mission taker without a system. Huayang, who was next to her, guessed that he was about to die. The sound waves caused a lot of damage to the body. Although he was lying on the ground and avoided most of the sound waves, he still couldn't withstand it. Ning Shu slid down and pulled his leg, trying to drag him as far away as possible. Huayang, there was really something wrong. Gradually, the sound waves became less intense, and the movement also became smaller. Then, the surroundings became dead silent. Ning Shu shouted, 2333, I'm here. I've used up all my energy. I think I'll be dormant for a long time. You should focus on your mission. After that, 2333 went silent. Ning Shu breathed a sigh of relief. Luckily, he didn't die. Great risks came with great opportunities. Although 2333 said that he had used up all his energy, it showed how powerful this system was. As for whether 2333's energy was really used up, Ning Shu didn't know. Intuition told him that 2333 had made a big profit this time. But the mission was finally completed. This mission was really full of twists and turns. He had seen a powerful wild system. He didn't know how many wild systems there were in the billions of worlds. Ning Shu got up from the ground, brushed the snow off his body, and nudged Huayang with his foot. Get up. Huayang frowned and said stiffly, I have internal injuries. Ning Shu, BK. Chapter 2583. As they walked back, they saw the princess walking towards them. Ning Shu and Huayang quickly hid. Huayang clutched his chest as if she sure was holding his heart. He said stiffly, You left the child behind and went to the grave? Ning Shu followed the princess. Huayang dragged his injured body and followed. The princess moved to the grave and found that the surroundings were different. She found a house for her daughter. When she came back, the surrounding trees were all broken. She suspected that she had gone the wrong way. The princess's expression changed. She searched everywhere for the place where Lu Hao was buried. Was there something wrong with Lu Hao's body? The princess was so anxious that she cried. After finding the place, she dug with her hands until her fingers bled. After digging for a long time, the princess's hands were already bloody. Finally, she found Lu Hao's body. The princess saw that her husband's head and body were separated. He was buried with a full head and tail. Why was his head separated now? Ah! The princess hugged Lu Hao's head and cried heartbreakingly. She looked desperate and painful. Then, she ran away with the head. Ning Shu quickly followed. Huayang felt that his organs hurt so much that he was about to vomit blood. The princess carried Lu Hao's head to a cliff. Without any hesitation, she jumped down. Ning Shu was speechless. Although he knew that the princess wanted to commit suicide, he didn't expect her to be so determined. She was probably triggered by the head. Huayang's stiff face was full of shock and confusion. He really abandoned his daughter and committed suicide? It's not suicide. It's suicide for love. Ning Shu turned and left. Anyway, the mission was completed. He exchanged the tea leaves and cloth for the new year. However, Huayang was injured internally. Although he had Ning Shu's spiritual energy, he couldn't walk anymore. So this time, Ning Shu went to exchange for things himself. Huayang didn't say anything. He stayed in Mountain Rock Town to recuperate. This scheming bitch was originally an expert. He didn't do anything serious, but his martial arts were high. He usually didn't help when he encountered bandits. Didn't his conscience feel uneasy when he saw him kill people? He came to help, but he ended up doing everything. He didn't hold back at all. Ning Shu felt very wronged. She had said several times that she was an expert, but in the end, no one believed her. What about the trust between people? Ning Shu led the caravan out of the pass. Once winter arrived, the wind outside the pass became even colder. When they arrived at the trading location, Ning Shu took out a few bags of tea bricks. tea bricks were compressed tea leaves. This kind of tea leaves definitely didn't taste as good as loose tea leaves, but it could be used to make milk tea. These nomads liked to drink goat's milk, so it would be better to boil it with tea. The tea bricks were quickly exchanged, but the cloth was not easy to get rid of. Because it was winter now, these people were all wearing fur, so there was not much demand for cloth. Ning Shu traded for what he could at a low price. Half a month later, they arrived at Mountain Stone Town. When they saw Huayang again, his face was no longer as pale as before. However, his face was still stiff and he had a sour expression on his face. However, Ning Shu saw that Huayang was holding a child in his arms. She was wearing a furry outfit and looked like she was carved out of jade. She was hugging his neck tightly. If she guessed correctly, this should be the princess's daughter. Why was Huayang holding her? Huayang said lightly, she was thrown in the snow. The people the princess entrusted to cheat her of the gold, silver, and jewelry, then threw the child away. She was so cold that she cried in the snow. I really couldn't bear it. Ning Shu just said, okay, you take her with you. The princess died happily. She didn't expect her daughter to be so young. Even if she was entrusted, how could they take care of her carefully? Some people didn't even love their own children. Why would they love someone else's child? Ning Shu also felt that there was another possibility for losing the child. They knew that the girl was the daughter of a rebel and didn't dare to take her in. They were also greedy for some money. The princess was lost. On the way back, Huayang finally couldn't help but gossip. How do you know that Lu Hao didn't die? And what's with the earthquake? Ning Shu was also confused. I don't know. But I know that more than 10 years ago, Lu Hao was working for my family. There was one time when he was like this. He was already dead. He didn't even breathe. Anyway, he was a dead person. But he came back to life. I'm guessing that's the case this time. The world is so big. Maybe someone can come back from the dead. Ning Shu had already thought of what to say. Then what's with the flying sand and stones and the earthquake? Ning Shu spread his hands. I don't know. Maybe it's the rolling dragon. Of course it's uncanny workmanship. There are many things that we can't understand. Huayang didn't say anything. Ning Shu said again, no matter what we face, we have to be calm. Huayang just glanced at her. She was so calm that she directly took a sword and chopped off her husband's head. Does old brother Pan know that his daughter is so cruel? Ning Shu said to him. Don't tell my father about this. My father is a long-winded person. If you guide him, he will think too much. He is also afraid that Lu Hao's matter will implicate the Pan family. It's better to hide it from him. Huayang just nodded. Ning Shu trusted Huayang's character. These people in the pugilistic world value their reputation more than their lives. Compared to such a person, she was even more lacking in moral integrity. Although they hurried, when they reached home, it was already the new year. Traveling in winter was terrible. They couldn't sleep in such cold weather. They might freeze to death. When Squire Pan saw Huayang carrying a child, he asked where the child came from. Ning Shu only said that the child was picked up and thrown away by his parents. Squire Pan said, oh, and began to nag habitually. This time, they went to deliver goods. This time, it took longer. Did he know how anxious, desperate, and worried his family was? They couldn't eat or sleep. Since she divorced, she felt that Squire Pan had become more naggy. She guessed that he was afraid that his daughter couldn't figure it out. Even if he went to deliver goods, it was also to relieve his worries. Ning Shu took out the gifts he prepared for Squire Pan. It was medicinal wine from beyond the Great Wall. He also gave Xiao Chui a jade bracelet. You don't have to give me anything. I will be relieved if you stay at home. Squire Pan said with a smile. Ning Shu smiled and nodded. Huayang, who had been holding a wooden stick, said, "Old brother Pan, don't worry. Your daughter's kung fu is not bad. At least, she could travel in the pugilistic world." Squire Pan and Xiao Chui didn't believe him. "She is a girl. How can she know kung fu?" Ning Shu shrugged at Huayang. See, sometimes no one believed the truth. It was really hopeless. /BK You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.